All right. Hello. Welcome to the Eddie Conversation Podcast, episode number 26. My name is Eddie Vigil, and I am your host. Today I'm joined by Chad Darnell.
That's me.
Yep. So, other quick reminders is if you are a fan of the podcast, like, subscribe, comment, review, wherever you're listening, share it. Yeah, thanks so much. But Chad, all right, great. Good to see you. It's been a bit.
It's been a year.
Yeah. And to lay the little bit of foundation here, you are everything. You're a writer, director, actor.
Casting director.
Trying
to get out of that, but keep getting sucked back in.
Right. Okay. So those are the foundational Chad pillars. And as far as the acting goes, that's screen and theater, correct?
Yep.
All right, sweet. So I solely know you. Our experiences have been you were the director under The Undertaker's wife.
Yep.
So I was a script supervisor. I got to witness that experience. That was your feature directorial debut. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did a film called Birthday Cake 8 years ago, and it was a feature-length film, but we shot it in 6 days, and it was a mockumentary-style film, so it was a very different experience. Like, we had, it was like, we had a sound person, we had a camera, but otherwise it was that movie where, everything's on my credit card. So it wasn't, this time it was like, I would go to touch something or like try to help sweep, and people would be like, step out of the way, that we have people that have, why are you doing that? People were getting very anxious when I tried to help, so.
Right. Yes. Okay. So I'm trying to figure out where to start, because I kind of want to start with The Undertaker's wife and just talk about that experience, because from my perspective, I don't know, like casting director too, like I do not know what it's like for you jumping between the chairs. Like you've done a lot of work as a casting director.
Yeah.
And I was kind of curious on the experience of directing this feature and what you think about looking back on it, and stuff that kind of snuck up on you that you weren't quite prepared for. Mm-hmm. That you were maybe expecting was going to go a different way. Mm-hmm. As vague as that all is. Let's start with that.
What's interesting is that time we shot the movie starting in early February of last year, and the film was officially greenlit in November. David Brown, who's our producer, wanted to actually start shooting in November, but I was already under contract to do a play in Atlanta called Moonlight and Magnolias, where I was playing David O. Selznick. So we were a month into rehearsals, and I couldn't go to the theater and be like, peace out, I'm directing my movie now.
Right,
I mean, it's just I made a commitment, and I had to see that through. And so we ended up pushing. But the reason we wanted to shoot earlier is because David and his partner were in the process of having twins, and they weren't due until April, but they came in January, and so they were in NICU the entire shoot, and that's what prompted that timeline. So, but in that timeline, November, December, I'm in rehearsals. We opened the show early January. I was also writing a screenplay for Mary Lambert, which was based on a book, and I was preparing for the play. So that was like, a stack of books that thick that David O. Selznick had been a part of, the history of Gone with the Wind, because that's what it was about, the making of Gone with the Wind.
Okay.
And prepping the movie and casting the movie. So I felt like I was training for an Ironman. So by the time we actually stepped foot on set the first day, it was easy. I didn't have to do a play. I didn't have to work on that screenplay anymore, which I finished the script in early January. But it just not having that on my plate anymore, not having the play on my plate anymore, just focus, not having to deal with casting anymore, that was a big nightmare that you don't think about until afterwards.
Well, I was gonna, all right. So as far as casting the movie, being, I don't know, man. All right, there's so much. Being that you come from casting, and now you're in the director chair again after 8 years since the last,
since the last film.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
I'm trying to imagine Does it feel like that should be a cakewalk thing since you have experience in that field? And like, I don't know, how was it for yourself? Like,
The
I guess.
interesting thing is, and like I never wanted to be a director.
Mm.
I know that
Do you
I
do you want? Okay.
Yeah, I do now. But
Okay.
my thing was back in the day, and I can pinpoint the day. I can tell you exact where I was sitting. I used to work for an actress, and I was her assistant. She was on a big TV show, and we were going back from Comic Con. And at the time, this was 2010, 11, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at the time I was researching and writing a script called Joey Stefano, which is a biopic about a porn star who died of a drug overdose in 1994.
Okay.
So we're in the process of trying to cast this movie. I mean, it's 2021 and we're still trying to get this movie made. But we were out to people, we were casting it, and we were talking to directors. And the actress that I was with, she said, you just need to, why aren't you directing the film? And I said, I don't want to direct. I said, I'm afraid of telling actors what to do.
Mm.
And that was the thing that, in my head, that's what a director did, is the director told actors what to do. And which, of course, could not be further from the truth. If you're a good director, there's so much more that a director does, but for whatever reason, and I mean, this is years of casting, too, that I've been on set.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, like, I think that the idea of me directing a film was going to be me telling actors what to do, which
Right.
is not at all what happens.
All right. So you said that to her at that time.
Yeah.
So, all right. So okay. Did you
And
have
so,
her-
and I also said, I don't know anything about cameras, and I don't know anything about editing. And she
Mhm.
said, well, that's why you hire a DP, and that's why you hire an editor. And so I started like slowly adapting to the idea of maybe I could direct this. And at the time, like a couple months earlier, some friends of mine got together. We shot a movie that never came out because of the editing. But it was like 13 stories that take place in a hotel. We shot at there's a hotel down near the airport called the Custom Hotel.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's still around. But we had these really, I wrote half the stories and the other director wrote half the stories.
So it's kind of like an anthology.
An anthology,
Okay.
yeah. And and they were all supposed to weave together. But of course, the other director who was editing it said, "Oh, well, we'll figure it in post," which is not something that ever happens. And so the movie never happened. But the actors on all of my projects were coming to me and asking me for direction, asking me about the stories. And one of the actors who was in it, when this whole Joey Stefano thing was happening, he said, you should just direct this movie. And I said, or he said, you should have been directing the film, because he was in my pieces. We were sitting at St. Felix in West Hollywood. And I said, the only film I've ever wanted to direct is Joey Stefano. And I said, and this conversation was just before I met Shishi LaRue, who's very important to the story. Met him 30 minutes later, and that's how the whole thing started. So, cut to all these years later, I started directing. I started directing short films. I started directing a web series. I did the sequel. Birthday Cake was a feature-length sequel to Groom's Cake, which was a short that we won almost every festival we got into on the LGBT circuit. And that's how the whole thing started. And then after Birthday Cake did really well on the festival circuit, it does not translate if you watch it like on Amazon or Hulu. It doesn't translate.
Is that in what way? Like, do you mean like seeing it in a theater with that specific crowd?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the experience versus.
Yeah. And I think also like the audiences that went to go see Birthday Cake had seen Groom's Cake as the short because we played every festival again with Birthday Cake. So they already knew the characters, and at that point they realized, oh, this isn't a real movie. Because a lot of people thought Groom's Cake was a real documentary, and it wasn't.
Gotcha.
And so, and this one, Jane Badler, who played Diana on V, who's a friend of mine, she played a very heightened version of herself. So it was, we were leaning into the mockumentary a little bit more. It did well, but then when it came time to sell the film, it doesn't translate. And it's a period film now because it was about marriage equality, and so now marriage equality is the law of the land. So it doesn't translate now, but it did back in the day because you're around, and a lot of the audiences in gay and lesbian film festivals are older people, so they related to the characters more, they related to the story more, and I think when you're in a theater experience like that, it really translated.
For sure.
It does not when you watch it on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, when you're okay.
And we shot it in 6 days. I mean, so it's not Schindler's List.
No, that sounds like a great experience, though. It sounds like fun. I was gonna come back to, so what triggered the difference? Like, what happened for you to get over the hurdle of I don't have to tell actors what to do? Like, what happened there?
So this is 2013, and I left LA. I still have my place. We lived in, as if people know where that is. We lived in Adams Hill, just over on the other side of the 5. And my roommate Link, you met Link. Link plays Landon.
Yes.
Undertaker's wife.
Mm-hmm.
We had a house for 16 years together, but in 13 years in, I moved back to Atlanta to start casting again. But from 13 to 16, I was kind of coming back and forth because we paid really super cheap rent. And it was cheaper just to pay rent than it was to move my stuff across the country. So,
Sure.
But in 13, I moved back to Atlanta. The boom in Atlanta was starting to happen at that point. We had 2 TV shows that were shooting.
Whoa.
And it was crazy. And I think Hunger Games that was the year they shot Hunger Games too. So things were like starting to slowly build at that point. And I got hired to work on Selma with my casting partner, Cynthia Stillwell. I got to work with Ava DuVernay. And that first bit of casting, I was more running the camera. I was booking the auditions. Okay. I was getting the sides out to the actors. I was doing all of the jobs of a casting associate, but I wasn't actually reading opposite the actors. But I got to communicate with Ava about casting and about what she was looking for, and every day we would do these callback sessions with her in the late afternoon with the actors, and that's how we cast the film. Mm-hmm. And then going on to the next film that I did was Magic Mike XXL. And that movie was completely different because the script was a work in progress. I got to improv all of the scenes with the actors. So I got, in the audition, like I'm behind the camera, but I'm improving with the actors. Channing Tatum's watching the auditions back in LA. And when I got to Savannah, where we shot the movie, when we were finally all there shooting, he would come into my office and sit down and want to watch the old auditions that we had done. And he was creating roles around actors that he really liked. And so that was,
okay.
That was a little different because, at that point, I'm giving them direction, but I was more improving with them as well. So I was far more active in that process. Yeah. And then things were popping off in Atlanta. I did the extras casting on Dirty Grandpa in Savannah, Christine, which was about the news reporter. There was another big, crazy beach movie. And then I did Mercy Street in Richmond. And I was just doing the extras casting on that, but it was hundreds of people that had to look like they were in the Civil War, fit certain sizes. Mm-hmm. It's a union town, so some of your union count of extras are union, some are not, so it's a lot of paperwork. But the interesting thing about that experience, Tracy Kilpatrick was the locations casting director, and inevitably, once every 2 weeks on the radio, they would scream, get Chad to the set immediately. And Roxanne or one of the other directors would be like, we're going to upgrade an extra. And so I had to go into extras holding and suddenly yank a performance out of an extra who had never been in an acting class before.
Right.
And some of them had been pursuing acting, but most of them were not because they were...
So, but that's like an extra's dream, right? Is being elevated to a speaking role, like what's the term?
Upgraded.
Sure.
Yeah, you're upgraded.
Sure. So how does that work for you when you're being tasked with that and you have a whole room full of people?
The first thing, I knew all of the extras really well because I cast them, and then we would see them in fittings. We would talk to them during the fittings because it wasn't just that we needed them, but it was a military hospital. So for a lot of those episodes, because we would block shoot, we needed that person back in that bed for the next 3 weeks. And so you had to be nice to these people. And we had a great crew, a great cast, but it's you went a little bit above and beyond to make sure that they were comfortable.
Which I think is great. it's nice to have incentive to be nice to people.
But even more so when you definitely need them back.
Sure.
But I mean, there was a great crew, really, really. I mean, everybody was so kind to everybody. It wasn't one of those sets where people were dismissive of the background. And also with all my years in extras casting, like if people were rude to my background, I would fight for them.
Yeah.
And but in that case, it was like I had to go into holding and like tap into the little heads and like get a performance out of them and like.
So that was like a little intro into the directing. Yeah.
And that was really where it was. And at the end of we wrapped the first season. I was working on a novel at the time. And Josh Radnor, who a super nice guy, but I can count like on one hand how many conversations I had with the guy the entire first season. I get this phone call while I'm in DC. Went up to DC for the weekend to work on my book, and it was this producer named Harula Rose, and she said, "Hi, Josh Radnor gave me your telephone number." And I'm like, "How did Josh Radnor get my telephone number?" And my first thought was, "Oh, he met her at a bar and he's trying to get her to be an extra." Like, but that's not at all who Josh is. But it was like, "Why are you calling me?" And she said, "I've got a film. We're shooting in Richmond," and he said that you're the guy that I have to hire to cast it, which was in principal casting.
Yeah.
And I was kind of thrown by the whole thing. I'm like, I didn't even know he knew my name, much less have my phone number. And so I called him later that night, and he goes, "No, it was very sweet." He goes, "It's really fun to watch you when you get called to set and you have to upgrade an extra." He goes, "Because you really get in there." He goes, "You know how to pull a performance out of these people." And also Richmond's not exactly a town known for a lot of actors. So with them shooting this SAG modified low budget film, I was gonna have to do the same thing. I'd seen a lot of theater in Richmond, so like I knew how to go to the theater actors and pull them in. But he also knew that I knew how to tap into them and get a performance out of them. So that was the first like big solo movie that I did. It was Patricia Arquette and Rainn Wilson, and then from that point on, I was a principal and extras casting director. So I did that on most all of my films. I moved to Savannah at that point, and I was there for 5 years, and it was.
And then like that whole time you kind of had it. Was it brewing at that point that like maybe directing, like maybe I'll gear up towards that?
I was still trying to get Joey Stefano done. That was my end game.
Okay.
Like I just wanted to get Joey Stefano made, and I met David Brown on the movie Killerman, Liam Hemsworth movie that I was the casting director on, and they shot that in Savannah, and that's when we got to know each other. He hired me to cast a film in Atlanta, which ended up not going, called Radiant, and then he started kind of poking around like what I was doing, and I was like, yeah, like I want to write, I want to direct, I want to do these things, and as he was gearing up with his own production company at that point, he wanted to read what I had done, and I sent him Undertaker's Wife, and he optioned it a year before we made it, and that was the beginning of everything at that point.
So, how long have you been pursuing the writing side of things? Because I guess for groundwork, I know that you've been pursuing the act, or you've been acting in your life since you were a kid.
Yeah.
On the writing side in film, specifically screenplay,
I studied screenwriting in college. I went to work for Turner in doing development, but I was doing development for nonfiction series and specials, so I wasn't doing narrative film. And in 2000, because this is important because I was living in Atlanta at the time when I wrote the script.
Sure.
I wrote a script called How to Make French Toast, and it was a romantic comedy. Sandra Bullock's company was interested in it at one point, and then not interested. And then I had an agent here in LA, a lit agent, who was taking it out. And in 2001, there was an impending writer's strike, and so they were buying up scripts left and right, and mine was slated to be bought on September 12th, 2001. And I was, at the time, I was doing extras casting at Central Casting. I was doing Alias and Crossing Jordan and Judging Amy when September 11th happened. I mean, we were all in the office immediately, and just all day long we were on the phones with our producers, and we were canceling extras. Like, we were never not on the phone. And we were just focused on what the hell is happening in our country right now. And so the next day, which was supposed to be the big meeting with the script, I look down and I see the caller ID come through on my phone that it was 20th Century Artist, and it was the agency at the time. And I just looked down And I'm like, oh my God. And I answer the phone, and David Ankrum was my agent at the time. He goes, buddy, I got some bad news for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember hanging up the phone. Like, I didn't even say a word to him. I hung up the phone, and I smoked at the time. I walked outside, had a cigarette, walking around the back lot of Central Casting, and I'm just thinking, okay, I'm never going to be a writer.
So to clarify, the way that you told the story, did you hang up before he gave the news?
It was a romantic comedy about a plane crash.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that's bad timing.
It was never going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, that was like, that script was never going to get bought. And so I walked around outside, and I was like, well, clearly I'm just going to have to be a casting director. And so from 2001 to 2006,
You kind of accepted your fate at that point.
Yeah.
In a way.
And at Central Casting, like, you couldn't quit a show. Like, if they wanted you, and I, not to badmouth Central Casting, but, like, the Mustang Ranch is a brothel, and I used to say that I was the prettiest girl at the Mustang Ranch because when I left, I had 14 television shows and 5 feature films, and it's because I was always on set. I was always in the production meetings. I was always in the tone meetings. I was very involved with all my shows, and I could get the numbers. I never had problem. Like, we were never down. There was never a show where it was like we had 30 people not show up today. Right. I was known as the Terminator. That if you didn't show up on one of my shows, I'd terminate you. And but people wanted to work on my shows because I took care of them. And so when I left Central Casting, I did a little bit of reality television. I did the first season of Celebrity Rehab, which was, oh my God, it was intense. It was really intense. And then I kind of floated around. I worked in a hotel as a night auditor, and then I ended up working with this actress. So kind of shapeless there for 5 years.
Yeah. So I guess, like, prior to the sale not going through, you took screenwriting in college.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious about, like, I don't know.
Yeah. So it's 2006. I'd been at Central for so long. I was tired. Like, I was getting a doctorate in film production by sitting in on all these writers.
Oh, right,
Like, I get to work with J.J. Abrams. I got to work with Tim Crean. And I quit Central Casting, and I got hired by the showrunners of Crossing Jordan for the last season. So I got to be the showrunner's assistant, which was it was the best because I got to be in the writer's room. I was the only person on the floor that had been on the show since the pilot. Like, writers would come and go. Right. Writers would come in and start to pitch an episode. I'm like, yeah, that was 301. Like, I knew the episodes. We'd storylines that we'd done before. And so at that point, I started writing again. And had we gone another season, I would have been the staff writer of that season.
Okay.
Warner Brothers, Susan Rovner, who is Robert Rovner's wife, and at the time was the head of television drama. She was head of something at Warner Brothers. I had written a pilot called Mercy. She loved it, and she tried to put it through the ranks, and it didn't go anywhere because at the time it was a serialized show, and nobody in television at that point was buying serialized. Everything had to be standalone. It had to be episodic, and she tried to get me on first season of Vampire Diaries with Kevin Williamson. And so, again, I'm just kind of floating here and there. And then I wrote a feature film called The Telling. And do you remember back when they had the tracking boards? You'd hear about these infamous tracking boards. Like, it was only an agent assistant or like a manager's assistant. It was like, so there was a computer database called, it was a thing that like they'd all log into. There was all there. It's like the clubhouse of the day. And they would talk about scripts that they liked or things that, it was an industry thing. And I don't know who this woman was, but she posted, she goes, whatever you do, don't read The Telling at night. I haven't slept in 2 nights. And the next day, my manager had 54 inquiries for the script. And all I did for like 3 weeks was just go around meeting people and talking about it. And it was it was a possession-based script, but it was at the wave. Like nobody was really doing possession-based movies at that point, but they were that wave was coming, and it just sucks because the deal never closed. I mean, it never got made. And it's one of those scripts that to this day, like it still gets brought up, like whatever happened to that? Well, can we make that now? And even David's like, maybe we can go back and revisit it. But it takes place in Savannah, which is where I've spent a lot of time.
Right.
And that was the beginning of the whole writing thing again, because I was taking these meetings, I was getting to meet with all these people, but I wasn't in my 20s anymore. I was late 30s at that point.
Okay.
And so I was, they weren't really interested in hiring the late 30s white guy to be in the writer's room. And so that kind of wasn't really an option for me, no matter how many meetings I went on. They would want somebody younger, females. I mean, more diversity in the writer's room than me.
Yeah,
and so
for sure.
I didn't, they weren't really interested in hiring me. But during this time, 2006, 2007, I met Sean Hayes and Todd Milliner over at Hazy Mills, and we started the process of taking out a pilot that a year ago tomorrow we would have taken to Universal again when the whole world shut down, because it's the 13th right now.
Yeah.
But we're still trying to get that project made, and I'm actually writing as a novel right now just to have it as a property.
Oh, right. I was going to ask about that. I do want. All right. One thing I'm very curious about, which I don't know, is a little bit of a sidetrack, but it involves the casting director side. Like you mentioned that you got to be an assistant to a showrunner, you got to be in different rooms, you got to witness stuff, you got to collaborate. I guess you were collaborating with, I would call them like top tier creatives.
Yeah.
I am curious from your perspective, what kind of conversations you get to witness, and what the difference is between like a J.J. Abrams having a conversation about a thing that involves whatever that is, and like a not as experienced director, because I assume that you pick and grab stuff that you apply to yourself when you're directing.
Totally, yeah, totally. And what was great, like Cross and Jordan, Alias, Judging Amy, those shows, and even Paris Barclay, who was the showrunner at the time on Cold Case, and I think he's still the president of the DGA. He was awesome. Like he was a big champion for me on the show, and we had worked together I think we worked together on Judging Amy, and we became friends through that. And then on Cold Case, he requested me on the season that I did with them. But the thing about, you think about it, it's a J.J. Abrams, but back in the day, he was just like, he had done Felicity, and he was prepping Lost, but he had this show about a chick who wore a lot of wigs, and it was a successful show. But the thing about JJ, and he's always been open to anybody on the crew. He's always had an open door policy. He's always been open to suggestions. And end of season 1, Valentine's Day 2001. I remember it because we had the craft service had a big Valentine's Day spread, and I had seen Queen of the Damned the night before. We were as the scripts were progressing, they were talking about Sydney's mother and how she had died, which clearly on that show, the second somebody mentions you're dead, that means they're about to show up again. And so we knew that they were in the process of casting that mother. And I had seen Queen of the Damned the night before. I knew that JJ was a huge fan of like 80s and 90s, like bringing those people back into those kinds of roles. And it was that moment of like, I have to say this. And I said, and they were talking, he and one of the producers were talking about an actress that they were looking at for the mother, for Irina. And I said, well, there's really only one option. And he turns around and he smiles at me, he goes, enlighten me. And I said, Lena Olin. And he cocked his head to the side, and one of the producers said, is she even still alive? And I said, well, I saw her in Queen of the Damned because she hadn't worked in a long time. She'd taken some time off. And I said, well, I saw her in Queen of the Damned last night. Cut to, she's the mother. And April Webster, who's my favorite casting director on the planet, she was she was the casting director on the show. We would always sit next to each other in the production meetings. And every production meeting, April would go through her mail because actors would send their
Okay,
mail to
right,
her.
right.
Back when actors would mail headshots and postcards, and
They still try that, I hear.
yeah, and I strongly encourage it because it's a way of
Okay.
getting yourself out there. But they would send them to the production office, and April would always make a pile of yes, no, and maybe. And the yes and maybe, she would, if they invited her to a showcase or a play, like she would try to go. I don't know what her schedule is now, but back then, like she really was an advocate for actors, and she really wanted to find and discover actors. And we were sitting next to each other in the production meeting, and I mentioned that I said I suggested Lena, and she turns to Mandy Sherman, who was her associate at the time, and she said it was Chad, and I was like, what? And she's like, we were wondering where that came from, and then she told me who she came up with, and it was a really good idea. It was a really, really good actress, and I was like, oh my God, I'm sorry. And she's like, no, it's like, everybody's excited about getting Lena, but that's just like the casting process. You always get there for any role. There's hundreds of great actors that can play that role.
Sure.
It's not that one role has to be played by that one person.
Because that's something I always get confused about. Because like I direct like little small things, and I'm trying to work my way up in my own kind of stuff too. So when I think about, like, I've never had the luxury or the pleasure of working alongside a casting director or a casting team. So I always wonder about how that works, because the director has an idea, you're coming with ideas.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, you have like a pool of, let's say, 100 people that you're like considering.
Yeah.
And then it's like, all right, well, it seems messy and weird.
And sometimes it's arbitrary as, oh, well, our lead actress is a blonde. So that takes out all the blondes,
No, for sure.
or our lead actor is 5'4".
Yeah.
That takes out all the actors, so it does, like, even on Alias, like, if you watch the show, you'll notice the only time you ever see a woman who is shorter than 5'5", and even then she's in heels, is when we're in a club scene. Because all that mattered in this club scene, everybody had to be hot. It didn't matter what kind of club it was, They all had to be hot. But any time else that you see, like Sydney walking through the campus or Sydney walking through the CIA, all of the women were between 5'6" and 5'9".
Sure. Yes, it's difficult.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious on, like, this is almost like more of a numbers thing, but what was a question, like, in terms of the percentage chance that the person being cast was suggested by the casting director versus, like, the director had ideas, or like if it's all casting, or what, or how that looks.
Yeah, so I have, in my very recent past, I've been working on again, trying to get out of casting, but we've been in the middle of a pandemic, and I need to
take
eat.
whatever. Yeah,
but I've been hired to cast several low budget films, and sometimes you've got the producer who's going to finance the film, and they'll be like, sure, we'll get that actor who's number 27 on the IMDb star meter, and there's no way in hell you're ever going to get that actor, and especially when it's a genre film. If it's a horror, if it's a thriller, if it's a vampire thing, whatever it is, there's certain CAA is not going to look at a Schedule F for Tom Cruise for your vampire movie. It's just not going to happen. And yet there are and I'm just using this as an example, like sure. But it's like you have to be realistic in your expectations of who you're going after. And if they have, like, vampire, like, we would never go after Ian Somerhalder for a vampire movie right now because he just played a vampire for years, and he's not going to be interested in doing that film for a Schedule F. It's just not going to happen. But a lot of times directors don't see that, and they're like, oh, well, he's already played that before. And it's like, there's a reason why that doesn't happen. The other thing that really has sucked about the recent past is I was working on a film that I quit. I've never quit a film before, and I quit this one. And they were just not realistic about any of their expectations. And it involved a gay character, several gay characters that they wanted name actors on of a certain age. And they were shooting somewhere not where the actor lives, so they're going to have to travel to another state
Mm-hmm.
to make $2,500 a week in the middle of COVID.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't understand that, I can't help you. And suddenly, like, I'm the bad guy for telling them that you're never going to get Victor Garber. It's never going to happen.
Because the expectation was if we have Chad help out with this, we can lock that person in and just do your job, get the person in the, like, is that kind of like the expectation? Okay.
Yeah. And years ago, there was a movie that that I was hired to cast. It was not a good script. But, I mean, I took the check. I mean, it was a good check. But, I mean, again, like, all I can do, I can make the offers. And, like, it was not a great script. And it was a female-driven thriller, horror. And the first option they wanted to go to was Renee Zellweger. And this was before Renee had done What If, and before she had like kind of made her comeback.
Yeah, yeah.
And or not even comeback, like she just started working again. Like she
Sure.
like fight her way
A
back
little
through.
bit of resurgence,
Right.
Yeah.
But we made a respectable $500,000 offer plus points, but she wasn't interested. And it was like suddenly I was the bad guy that I didn't get Renee Zellweger. I'm like, it's your script. You do understand that, right? I'm not a sorcerer. That's a big line that I always use when I'm in casting. I'm not a sorcerer. And then the actress who we were going to end up hiring before the whole movie went away, you would know her. She pops up in everything. But her agent wanted $150,000 for her. And the reason is because it was a genre film. They weren't going to take a Schedule F against that. They wanted more money and points and a rewrite. And, and respectively, she absolutely should have asked for the things that she asked for. And again, like at that point, they were ready to fire me. And one of the producers called me and she said, and this was after 5 actors. There were 5 actors that we had went out to. And Renee Zellweger, like, we don't know why she passed. We can assume it was the script, as that's why the other actors passed as well. It just was not a good script.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That happens. People write bad scripts and then think they can get made into movies.
Yeah, and that would make sense from the actor perspective for sure.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, the script is not where I'd like it to be, so for me to come onto this is what I need.
Yes.
And
Yes,
blah,
yes,
blah,
yes.
blah. It sounds...
If they're going to, if there's some hook in there that they think they can work, they're going to request script. I mean, even with The Intelligent, my next thing, like, I'm going to all of the actors, like, this is what I have, but let's collaborate on it. Like, are there things that you want to incorporate? We can talk about that later, because as one of the actors, like, we're really reshaping the character to some of her culture. So they brought me in to fire me. And so I sat down and because I knew I had this knowledge going into it, the other 3 producers weren't looking at me. And I said, okay, first off, your script's a piece of shit. And I suggested the only way, it was a first-time writer-director, which again, that's a whole other thing. Like trying to sell Renee Zellweger to a first-time writer-director, it's not going to happen.
Right.
It's not going to happen. I said, your script's a piece of shit. It needs a page 1 rewrite. And it needs, I would hire a female director, like a Mary Lambert, which is who I suggested, and have her, who's really great with stories. She teaches at NYU. She teaches film. Have her work with the writer, and fire him as the director, have him on board as the writer. They rewrite the script together. She directs the film, and then maybe, again, you have a Mary Lambert. She's the queen of horror film.
You give the movie a chance with that kind of,
Yeah.
So you offered some suggestions.
I did. And they agreed to all of my suggestions. So they went from, firing me to, like, let's talk to Mary Lambert.
And that's when you quit?
No, the writer-director was not, was like, no, I'm not doing that. This is my baby. And I'm like, peace out. So, it just never, the whole thing never happened. But so many times, first-time filmmakers, independent filmmakers, people that are trying to make budgets under $2 million, they think that just because, we're making a movie. Actors need to make their insurance. So, of course, Lena Headey's going to do my film. No, she's not.
Or I guess more on the positive outlook side too is like my passion is there. This is like they'll buy into this, and if I just have a chance to talk to them or whatever the thing is, they'll believe in me and they'll jump on and try to support. And which is it's a tough sell, and
It's a very tough sell.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes like an actor will like they'll take the offer, and it's like, and let's like example. Let's say like give me an actor from True Blood who's not Stephen Moyer.
I've only seen a few episodes of True Blood.
Or any show, any like sort of long-term episodic show that's been successful. Any
David Schwimmer. Does that count?
David Schwimmer, that's a great example. So David Schwimmer, great example. He was on Friends for years. He's been producing his own stuff. So say that we have a $2 million, 1.5. We have a $1.5 million film, 3-week shoot in L.A., but it's like a biopic, or it's about like the guy who discovered the HER2 gene, the cancer gene. Something that's like that could speak to him, that he's interested in exploring. It could be about a moment in time, and he's playing a historical figure. He might be interested in doing that, but I would not take my little movie, The Telling, to him at a Schedule F for 3 weeks because it's a horror film, it's a genre. When you look at now, but people like Patrick Wilson have made a killing doing these movies because they do work at a certain rate and then they make all their money in the back end. And so that some actors do take that. Sure. I mean, when you look at the original Purge, those actors, when you look at the concept of it, and again, it wasn't a huge budget movie. The Purge, the first, The Conjuring wasn't big budget.
Yeah. That's what studio? That's
Blumhouse.
That's their model, right? Bring them in with a low commitment money side. Like everybody buys into that model with the promise that one of these is going to explode, and then.
But it's also their studio, so it's it's not you and I with a rich aunt. It's,
right.
That's so it's about expectations, I think.
So I guess like one follow-up question that I had as maybe to I don't know, last bit of casting stuff, but like, have you, being that it is so difficult to get, let's say, like a name for, or you don't really you don't have a history of dealing with the indie stuff more. That's more of like a recent thing that you've said, right? I was gonna ask about if you've seen any circumstances in which you have seen a I don't know, like a Reese Witherspoon or something jump onto an indie when
and it because sometimes they're
and why they do it or whatever, like
right.
That, yeah.
They're it depends on the story. Like there's my friend Ruth Coker Burks. I'm so bummed. She sold her movie rights to her life and to the book that she wrote. But she was a woman who, back in Arkansas in the early 90s, she began taking care of all of these men who were dying of AIDS. And so back in the day when we first met each other, this was like in 2016. So we've known each other for 5 years. I was like, I want to write this story. And I'm like, this is the kind of movie that because of this, like, and anybody who read the story was like, whoever plays this role is going to win an Oscar. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, at the time, Jennifer Lawrence would have been a great Ruth Coker Burks. And the thing about Ruth is she goes, yeah, I don't know about her. I think I want Amy Schumer to play me. And this is before Amy had like blown up. This was like, she had done, I said, the chick from Last Comic Standing. And she's like, yeah, I think she's funny. And of course, Amy went on to do Trainwreck and hugely successful show on Comedy Central. And it was a great idea of casting. Either one of those names could have greenlit that movie. But it's about a specific period in time. It's a biopic. Now she's got the property as the book as well.
Those are very different names for sure.
Yeah, very, very different. Yeah. But I mean, but at the same time, what's funny is that they're very good friends. They are very similar, but they are very different names. But yeah, and now that I know Ruth better, I'm like, yeah, that would have been Amy Schumer. That's who she is. But recently, like, and again, I think it comes down to your expectations on your cast. Sometimes actors, and nobody likes to destroy the mystique of like why an actor takes a role. Sometimes it's just like, yeah, I needed a paycheck.
Sure.
Because when you look at actors have to pay managers and accountants and agents and
publicists.
and so they're not. At the end of the day, a lot of actors are not making a lot of money off of these movies. They're getting their residuals and they're getting some back end, but it's the bottom line is they're paying a lot out.
Yeah, I guess like my gut reaction is, if I want Michael B. Jordan in my movie, the best likelihood of him being a part of it is like, oh, like I've known him since
Exactly.
whatever, we've worked with each other a few times,
Yeah.
or like I've been on set, or like there's that connection there, and the story is good, and the schedule works, and he's not tied to sequel to his Marvel movie, like all that kind of stuff. Like,
1,000%. Yeah. And what sucks is that it does so many times come down to relationships or like who knows who. But that's also been like Sarah Colonna, who was in Undertaker's wife. Like we became friends a year ago, and I mean, Sarah probably would have done the movie, had anybody asked her. She's just that kind of person. Like she loves to act. She's very easy to work with. Now everybody's gonna be sending her stuff, but she's awesome. She's opened, and she was a team player. I mean, the day that we worked with her, we had to take a break for a period of time for a setup, and she was totally chill, like so easy to work with. But it's no secret that we had some scheduling issues casting wise with Undertaker's wife.
Yeah, you've been very vocal about it on social media and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean it's the thing, like it's part of the show because there's a docuseries that followed us. I mean it's not like that was a secret. Like everybody knows what happened.
It happens all the time.
It happens all the time. It happens all the time.
Right, so what is the thing? I mean, because I know the story, but
on Undertaker's wife, we had a docuseries that was filming the making of, and so the cameras from the time I stepped off the airplane from doing the play, the first night that I started prepping, they caught me. We at the time we had just lost the lead actress at that point, but we still had our lead actor. And
the timeline for that, just to clarify,
was 3 weeks before.
And you were
shooting.
That's okay. So you got to town, like you said, when you got off the plane, like that was
2 weeks before.
2 weeks before.
Yeah, 2 weeks before we started shooting.
And then you kind of get the news around that time, maybe, or whatever.
So like that.
So I guess the question is, you made your flight to LA knowing that your movie was cast. Was that
No, I flew in knowing, I think that afternoon somehow it was like within like 24 hours we knew that we had lost our lead actress because her agent had pulled her for some possible TV stuff that she did not get. And I mean, she's a friend of mine, and that's how I got her, because we knew each other, and she loved the script, and she wanted to do the film, and it was a strong female lead, and it didn't have to twist her arm. Like she read the script, and she wrote me back, and she goes, "I'm in," and all exclamation marks, and like, "Please talk to my people." And she had just signed with new agents, so this was kind of a good thing. But then they wanted to put her on for pilot season instead of my little film, and but we had the lead actor, and so this all goes down on the show. Like I land, and nothing holds you more accountable than having a camera in your face. And so I'm like, but I also knew from casting, you always get the right actor. I've never, in 30 years of casting, I've never had a show where it's like you're up against the wire and you don't have the actor. Something's going to happen. You're always going to get the right actor. You're going to get an actor. It's going to work out. And so that's what I kept saying. Like, I'm a little stressed, but we always get the right actor in the end. And I do believe that, but it's still terrifying when you don't have that actor. And so Monday came and went, and then Tuesday we get a phone call that we've lost the lead actor. And it was because of a family emergency. So it wasn't like, oh, you don't have her now, peace out. Like, he had a family emergency come up. So now we're having to recast the two. And we lost the kid. Because I had a kid, we lost the kid Monday.
When you say the kid, you mean so the family.
The family. Okay, we lost the 1, 2, and 3.
The lead family that runs the whole movie.
Yeah. And the thing was, like, we could have easily replaced the kid, which we did. And the funny thing about that is we had over 1,500 submissions for I released the breakdown. 1,500 submissions 6 hours later. Started sending sides out, and Cooper Devaney there was nobody else. It was Cooper, and then there was everybody else. And Cooper he's going to be a megastar someday. And he looks just like Shannon, who we would end up getting. But which would be, again, you always get the right actor.
Sure.
And it would have been great to have had the original kid, but his agent called me and it was really kind of. Never start off a conversation with me. You have a problem. I think we have a problem. But I had a problem because he was going to be recurring on a show in Canada, and so I was going to have to fly him back and forth. Like he was already on my film. Like we had a deal memo. I was going to have to fly him back and forth, and I'm like, how are we supposed to do? He works every single day. Like, how am I supposed to teleport him back and forth? Like, that's not how any of this works. And so that's why we had to replace with Cooper. So by Wednesday, I think we had Cooper by Thursday. I think I'd cast him Thursday. I did a Zoom with him, or Skype. That was before the Zoom.
Back in the day.
Before the Zoom was a thing. And then suddenly our lead actor came back, and so we had him back on board again. I was like, oh, thank God we have him. We had gone to another actress friend of mine, and and I'm currently negotiating with her on another film right now. And she wanted to do the film, and then we had her, and then the following Monday we had lost her again. The following Wednesday we had lost her again, and so we had her for 3 days, and then we lost her, and I'm freaking out, and I'm like, I go in to David's office, and I'm like, I don't understand how this is happening. How did we lose her? And then my email goes off, and I get this very sweet email from her. She's like, I'm so sorry I can't do your film. My manager and my husband won't let me do it because I just had back surgery last week. And I'm like, honey, there's no way you could have done this movie. There's no way you could have done this. But she really wanted to do the role. But she...
Yeah, back surgery is kind of a limiting factor there for... just physically being able to show up.
Do anything, yeah. Much less the things that she would have to do in the film. And so I had to fly back to Atlanta to do the last weekend of the show, and we didn't have 1-2 on the call sheet. I mean, like the call sheet was going out, and it said TBD. And again, like David had said at that point, he's like, worst comes to worst, we'll just cast unknowns. And I said, who are we? I don't even have time to put a breakdown out, much less cast it at this point. Like, we can't even cast unknowns at this point. And so, like, we're going to have to push production. Like,
you were going to have to step into a number.
Yeah. And that was the joke. It was like, this was your, and somebody said that on camera. Like, that was my master plan all along, was to play the two roles myself. And I was like, yeah. And then, of course, we'd gone through some actors. We were dealing with an agent who was throwing out actresses' names, and they were quickly reading the script, and passing very quickly. And then David called me, and I was getting into makeup for the play, and he called me and he said, what do you think about Shannon Sossaman? I'm like, I love Shannon Sossaman. And then her manager called me, and he said, can you talk to her in 15 minutes? And I said, I can talk to her for 15 minutes in 15 minutes. It was 6:45 because the show went up at 7:30. And so we ended up talking at 7. And then the stage manager comes back, and she's like, 15. And I'm like looking at her in the mirror. I'm like, okay, I see you. But we always would hold it for like 10 or 15 minutes for the audience. And she's like, 10, 5. And then she goes, places. And I'm at this point, like, I have Shannon on the phone. She hasn't finished reading the script yet, but I am pitching my heart out. Like, if I don't have her, I don't have a movie come Monday morning. And the stage manager, she comes, she says, places, like, kind of, like, exasperated. And I said, I will be on stage when I get on stage, and you'll know it because you'll be looking at me. And Shannon goes, oh, you need to go. And I'm looking at the stage and said, no, you are literally the most important person in my life right now. I'm like, I was demonic. I was like, I have to have you. Like, I don't care. I said, that audience can sit there and wait for an hour. I am not leaving this phone. The show must go on, but it will go on without David O. Selznick. And of course, the whole thing is David O. Selznick is a crazy person. And so I went running. So Shannon's like, oh, go do your play. I'll finish the script and we'll talk soon. So I felt like I might have her, but I still didn't have her. And I go running backstage, and I was like apologizing to the stage manager for being a crazy person. And I grabbed the doorknob, and the guy playing Ben Heck goes, did you get your actress? And like the overture music is going, and I'm like, I realized I don't have her yet.
Mm-hmm.
And
You
it was the
gotta.
greatest first act I've ever had because I was on pure adrenaline the
Yeah,
entire time.
yeah. You were method there.
Yeah, but then method. But then I flipped over the phone. It was just a sea of text messages from everybody, like she's in, and so we had her at that point. So I was like so relieved at that point,
Mm-hmm.
but we still didn't have
The husband.
the husband. And then one of the text messages, I called David, and at that point the stage manager's like, "Do you need 5 more minutes?" I'm like, "No, I just give like quick call." And so I call him, and he's like, "What do you think about John Brotherton?" And at the time, like I knew who he was, but I didn't know who he was, and so I said, "He sounds great. Can he be on set Monday morning?" And so John was reading the script. I closed the play. I'm in my car driving home, and John and I had this 30-minute conversation about the script and the character, and he was like, "It's dense." He's like, "There's a lot here," and I said, "Well, do you feel like you can? I mean, I know you've got 72 hours before we start rolling on this." And he's like, "No, I'm in for the challenge." He was like really in for the challenge, and
Mm-hmm.
so we spoke that weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and then we had a short day that Monday because it was just that first scene with them touring the house, and then we continued talking. So like, John's a total pro.
Yeah, John was. I remember. Yeah, 'cause that was the. I think on social media you mentioned he signed on 24 hours before he was going to be basically on set
Yeah.
playing the character.
Yeah.
Which.
Yeah, because Shannon didn't work until Tuesday. She didn't work that first day.
Okay.
She came to visit the set, but she didn't.
Yeah, because I remember as a script supervisor, I don't recall if that was like common knowledge day one, or maybe it was because you're. I don't know. I don't remember. But regardless, I'm thinking about like there was never any issues with John being not having his like I never had to like he never had to call me for line. I
Yeah.
never had to like really go in there and be like, all right, so this is kind of what's going on. There's none of that, and I wouldn't if I didn't know, I wouldn't have known because he was such he was
He's such a
on
pro.
it from the get
Oh
go.
yeah, like 1,000%. Like he never had a moment where it's like, oh, now that I'm playing it this way, I think I was not authentic playing it this other scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was in from the jump. But I think it's also because we communicated. Like we had a big open conversation about their relationship, like what he saw, the relationship to the kid, to her, and how they both played the space between each other because their marriage is not in a great place. It was beautiful. Like
Yeah.
and they really I mean it was they didn't have any time. But they totally created that relationship, and it was completely believable, and
Yeah,
and it's beautiful on film.
because that's kind of like what acting comes down to, right? Is making the decisions and committing to the decisions and making them very quickly and not really second guessing yourself.
Yeah.
So, being that the half an hour conversations or the night before conversations with the director can, you can grab like, all right, this is my decision, show up,
Yeah.
and be consistent throughout. It's quite the accomplishment.
Yeah,
So,
and I think also it's the fact that he's just such a genuinely nice guy, and like everybody, like he would hang out on set, like he wouldn't go back down to base camp, like he would hang out, sit on the couch, in between scenes that he wasn't in, just to feel the space, and he and Cooper did a lot of work together, just kind of hanging out and getting to know each other. So I mean, and their relationship is completely believable as well. I mean, it was a really special movie because everybody, and also the other supporting players who came in they created that world of the little town that we had.
And I guess because we haven't really specifically mentioned it, but we should maybe have you say a little blurb about like what's the story.
The story is the Davis family have lost a child 4 years ago in a drunk driving accident, and they as a trade they are a family who are morticians. In Chicago they had a funeral home, but after the death of their child their marriage began to suffer. They got out of the business. They didn't work for several years. So they buy this very historic funeral home in Georgia, Goodland, Georgia, called the Duren House, which is this gigantic. It was a family of morticians who, over the generations, had embalmed and buried everybody in town. And it's a very small town, and they're the only funeral home in town. And the first night that they're there, when they arrive in town and they're unpacking, they hear sirens going off in the background. And later that night, somebody shows up to bury his brother because he was the drunk driver who was involved in this crash. And that's the first sign that they're like, oh God, not again. And also Jack, John Brotherton's character, does not want his wife dealing with anybody involved in a drunk driving accident because we know that there's some sort of trauma there. Because the drunk driver who killed their child, she was driving the car. She was not the drunk. It was somebody else. She walks in and he pulls a gun on them, and then bad things happen. And
the trailer's out there.
Yeah.
Wait, no, the trailer public, right?
I think it's still out there. If not, there'll be a new one out soon.
Okay, because I know
they did the trailer for the market. And so I was like, "Oh, you're giving a lot away in the trailer." And they're like, "No, it's a trailer for the market. It doesn't matter." But they gave a lot away in the trailer.
Okay, yeah, because we're currently, what month is it, Chad?
March.
What are we in here?
March 2025.
Right. So this was the expected release date was planned for
October of last year.
Right. So it's edited. It's all the way through.
Yeah,
ready to go.
we're just finishing sound right now. But the problem, of course, was that with all the COVIDness of everything, I was supposed to be in LA a year ago this week, cutting the film with Gordon, our editor, and we had to do everything remotely. And I do not recommend having to do that ever because
it was clunky or what?
It was a clunky experience for me, not for him. I mean, it was like he was doing the best he could. But he would send me like 20 minutes at a time. I would watch those 20 minutes. I would give 10 pages of notes, send it back. He would send me the next 20 minutes. But then I'm having to go back and then rewatch this and then watch this. And then there were certain scenes that we would just, like, I would like, send me all the dailies. Like, I just want to watch everything so I can see what we're missing here. And there's nothing like being in the room with your editor and being able to say, well, I know that we have another shot of this, or like, I know that there's a shot here.
Yeah, and just clicking right over, looking at it, placing it together.
And instead, it's like all you're doing is you're just getting chunks of the movie at a time.
So it's kind of like delayed responses and whatnot. Like there wasn't was there a way? Because I thought I've heard of some people doing like, I mean like
when they
assume like screen sharing and being on the call. Like I don't know if
we didn't have that technology, and I've had friends that have done that, but it was just easier this way to. I mean, it was annoying as hell, but I mean it was easier just to like give him notes and then rewatch the edit back. The other thing that happened, which was just a mishap, was somebody had, not the editor, but somebody had loaded the film incorrectly. So the first pass that I'm watching, I'm like, wait a second, because like Igor had shot with like these lenses and stuff that I was like, I know I'm this is not the movie. And then suddenly like boom mics are in the thing. I'm like, what is happening? And then he said, oh, it got loaded wrong. So the entire pass of the movie, I'm not watching the actual movie. It's not, and then Igor, who did the color correction as well, Igor's the DP. Igor's like, oh my God, he goes, I'll correct it when I do the, and so then now the color corrected version is the correct version, but it has the temp sound, the temp music to it, and Eric Schroeder's score, which is gorgeous, is locked to the not correct, uncolor corrected. So it's like you're watching like 4 different versions of the movie. Yeah. And I haven't seen the whole thing together yet.
Oh, okay. Eye rolls.
Soon and very soon. But then of course, you know, as things happen, like your editor gets finished editing the film, your composer gets done composing the music. They're all working to the locked picture. Yeah. Igor finishes the color correction. Sound is in process. None of us are in the same zip code. And then COVID like shut everything down, and then because of that, like the buyers, the studios, the distributors, the people that are going to put the film out there, they ran out of money. So like nobody's looking at your movie in that time frame in the summer of last year, and so deals that were on the table suddenly were no longer deals because that person was gone
on pause, on hold, waiting it out.
So now that things are back to normal, now that things are moving again,
Sure.
people are, they're looking at films, and that we've got some pretty great distribution deals on the table. They're not what they were a year ago, but that's just something that we all have to expect. I mean, it's either that or wait 3 years,
Yeah.
and nobody wants that.
Yeah, because I figured, I don't know if this is a decision that comes from you or if it comes from like David and the producer level, but like I think about it is nice to like, all right, this is the situation now, lock it in, and let's just kind of move on to the next thing because it releases at least that weight where it's
Yeah,
like it would be painful to be like, all right, let's indefinitely wait on this and then still not get the thing that we had 4 years ago or
exactly,
whatever. So.
exactly, and that's what sucks. I mean, it's like I don't feel like the film's gonna get buried, but and again, like people are running out of things to watch, and so there is that too. Um, but it's I'm I almost kind of want to take it on the festival circuit
Mm.
first because it's not, which is not going to happen. But I've screened it for a couple of friends who've they've seen the temp sound, but not the
Okay, yeah.
and um, it's exactly the movie that I wanted to make. It's not a scary like boo kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a psychological thriller, and for the family, they are unaware of this entity in the house because they're really fighting their own demons in the story and the relationship and trying to get away with this thing that they've done.
Right.
And that really translates. And so, and it's been fun to like get to that final moment of the film, and immediately like the people that you're watching it with are like asking questions about, and not like I didn't get it, but you like, but like. They're putting together the pieces like
the world building kind of lore kind of questions.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
All right, whoa, hold up.
Oh wait, so was that and that was and he was and that was and they're putting
Sure.
and of course
Cool.
it's all questions that we leave open for the audience to figure out. I'm like, that's the point. But but what's really fun is those people that I've screened it for. Because we've all seen screeners of friends' films, and it's like, oh my god, it was so good, and then you never talk about it again. But it's like days later, they're calling and like,
Okay,
I'm
that's
really
cool.
thinking about this scene and the way that, like, I was thinking about this thing, and so people are still thinking about it days later.
And that's a good sign.
Yeah.
So as far as the post-production side, being that you've been entrenched in casting and don't normally deal with the post side of things,
Yes.
is my assumption. I don't.
Very much so.
So what aside from the COVID uniqueness of some situations,
Yeah.
there was stuff post started before COVID on this movie.
It did.
Regardless, I guess
No,
regardless.
it did. It did start. It did start because I was supposed to be in LA this week, a
plans
year
were
ago.
made.
Yeah, plans were, and Gordon was already, like, he was cutting.
Yeah.
He was cutting as we were shooting, I think.
So how was? I guess we talked a little bit about like the editing back and forth, but was okay. A thing when I'm directing, I always get stuck on the post side with like direction for the composers. There's like.
I want to talk to you about this. So,
Okay,
like,
sure.
what?
Yeah, what stuff was coming up?
How crazy do you get in post?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm super indie side. I get very simplistic. I mean,
same.
So, it's kind of similar to like what you were saying about the actor stuff. Where like I'm not really here to tell the actor what to do. I'm here to facilitate a conversation and get on the same page with what we want. So that's how I approach the back end as well. With all right, composer, I don't really know music. This is kind of like vibes and words and things. You kind of like then they create some option tracks. I forget what they're called.
Yeah.
Well, regardless, I don't know. I try to get.
Have you met Eric Schroeder before?
I don't believe, unless
he's the composer on Chasing Nightmares, and he was a composer on.
Unless he was on set, unless he dropped by set.
He was. Yeah. He's done a lot of indies. He's fantastic, and like we really like. I sent him some music that I'm like, this is what I hear. I mean, obviously not this music, but it's like these are the instruments.
Sure.
But we really like. We started working out like this is. I want to hear this instrument. And we had great conversations. Like, I would play him something, and I was like, what are the instruments that are in here? And then he would tell me, I was like, okay, great. That oboe, I want that here. And this is how I hear it. And like I would like play out notes for him.
Mm.
I can't play the piano to save my life. But I would pick it out and he would incorporate that into the score. And he was really open to all my suggestions. And I was like, I hear strings. I want this to feel like a throwback to the Psycho score. And not just the neat, 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 but like the entire strings. So there's a lot of strings that are in the score. And we were already talking about, as we're moving into the Intelligent, and he's doing the score for that, we're going to talk about the tonally, like what that's going to be like for the Intelligent as well. Because I want the actors to kind of, it's been interesting like talking to the actors. It's like, yeah, I'd love to hear like what you hear as the movie. Because when you're looking at mood boards and stuff, it's like it's kind of helpful for them creating that world as well.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of who's the guy that Joker.
Todd Phillips.
Todd Phillips. They've had talks about like there are some scenes where Joaquin Phoenix, like they're trying to figure out like the scene isn't right. Let's just like what do we got? What do we figure out? And then like they're in the bathroom. Like that's where they were shooting the thing. It's like, okay, we have this bathroom thing, and then he's like, well, I just got some music from the composer. Let me just play this for you, and that kind of inspired like the dance thing in the bathroom and whatnot. So having the composer and having that sound and the vibe, can really help with.
But what's interesting is like, and I mean, obviously with Undertaker's wife, I had a few hours with them before we could really kind of dive into things. And what was great about Shannon is she created everything about her character down to the costumes. Like she had her own closet, so she wanted her own clothes she had done her own continuity on the clothes that she wanted. And I remember Jose, our costume designer, calling me. He's like, "Well, we're saving some money on costumes with her." And but every actor works differently. And on the Intelligent, we have an actress she's a name actress. You've seen her and a lot of stuff. She comes from a culture that we are tying her character into the mystique of what she does in the film. And but when she read the character, it was a little on the nose, and which is why I cast her to kind of like change a little bit. And we had conversations about, she's like, well, this is what, she goes, if you're open to it. I said, of course I'm open to it. I mean, I will listen to anything. And so she told me about what she saw the character as, what she would wear, the kinds of clothes that she would wear. We talked about the culture. We talked about in her culture how people are buried. And so we, all of that's going into the script. So I was, of course, really nervous about sending her the rewrite. And she was asking for it Friday night. She's like, I want to get it in my bones. I'm like, oh, God, I'm not ready to show this to you yet. But I was, it was enough of a draft where we were sending it out to other actors. So it was like, okay, well, here we go. I was like holding my, we already had her. The deal's closed.
Sure.
And she knows that we're, it's a work in progress.
But it's more of like a personal fear, right? Of
totally.
trying to get it right and respecting the culture.
Yeah.
Being that it's not your culture, I'm assuming.
And don't know anything about it. Yeah.
So, because I've had that experience too when I'm trying to write, I have a writing partner and she's part Korean. So we'll incorporate some Korean stuff and whatnot, and I'll get scenes where I'm writing for those characters, and I'm just like, I don't really know what it's like, but it feels weird, especially in today's day and age too, where
you don't want to appropriate something.
Where there's the risk of somebody watches the movie and they have an issue, and then they look at who directed it, and it's like, oh, that's why there's an issue. So trying to stay ahead of that in some way is
and so it's like I wanted her to be, and I said, just keep in mind, it's a work in progress. You and I haven't talked about it yet. And so she wrote me back. She goes, no, it's beautiful. Like, she loved it. So I'm like, all right, well, you and I next week will Zoom about finalities of things. But,
Sure. It's in a good spot for now.
Exactly. So,
cool. It's good to hear.
But it's terrifying.
That stuff's scary. Yeah, it's very scary.
Because you don't want to, like, not, and appropriate isn't the right way. You don't want to get somebody else's culture wrong.
Sure. Which I think it's good that it's scary. Like, you don't want to jump into it assuming that you know everything about everybody, and then I don't know, there's consequences for that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
And so, but she's awesome. And then the other actors, one of course with casting, like one of the big fears is our lead actress. She's at one of the big agencies, and so you're dealing with 1,000 people on her team, and trying to close that, and that's going to happen with any casting, no matter who you were dealing with. You're never, your first offer is never the first is never the final offer, and especially for a number one or two, you're going to go back and forth, and David is so good at negotiating. I get so spooked by all of that stuff, and he handles it like a champ, which is why he's a producer.
Which is why that's his job.
Yeah. And he doesn't mind it. But we finally closed her Thursday. And it was like this relief that came in waves. That was like, oh, thank God we have her. 2 hours later, it's like, oh my God, we have her. Oh my God, we have her. Oh my God, she's done. Like, which is so different than
I think
last time.
Which I think I teased you on. I commented on your Facebook post too. I was like, I hope you're not jinxing.
Oh right, yeah,
this,
totally, yeah.
With this thing.
But I mean, we with the other actors, like we were, the actress that we had originally set, we were in the process of doing her contract, which is why her agent was able to yank her, because she wasn't officially closed yet. Yeah. She wanted to do the film. And it was interesting, though, because it was like she and the kid as well, who we originally had cast, like, we didn't speak for a while. It wasn't on me. It was like, I mean, you're the one who fucked me by leaving. It's, again, you can't take, and the biggest lesson is you can never take this personally. With actors, I mean, never take your friendships personally.
Well, I feel like that's just across the board in the industry in general too. Where like I don't know, 'cause being that everything is always in flux, even when somebody means well and they're like, yes, we totally want you, you're going to be on, and they're like, well, let's say on my end, it's like, well, there's no contract yet, I haven't signed in, and you're just kind of waiting for everything to kind of solidify, and people will say all the right things and get out of the conversations and be like, all right, in our eyes, you're in. You're totally going to be there. And then it just doesn't happen, or something changes, or even,
or there's some other decision maker.
Or they're lying.
Yeah. But there's always some other decision maker that's like,
right.
Like there was an actor that, a friend of mine who just worked with an actor who I had auditioned for another film. And I was like, oh my God, I love him. Tell him I said hi. So he goes to him and says, oh, Chad Darnell says hi. And apparently he got this huge attitude because he was convinced that he was going to be in this film that he auditioned for me. And I was like, I literally did not indicate in any way, shape, or form that you were going to be in the film. Like, I knew from the audition, this was not going to be the role for you. I think that he's talented. I think that he's growing. Like, I think that he's, he's not Laurence Olivier at this point. But
sure.
But then I found the audition. I sent it to my producer friend last night. I was like, did I ever indicate that he had the role, or like make him believe? And he's like, no, it's clear. But also it was like, it just wasn't. Again, he's a good actor. He was not right for that role.
Yeah, and was that? I'm assuming that's some sort of either miscommunication or just actor assumptions.
Yeah, I think it's assumptions. Yeah,
where it's like, the director personally reached out to ask for an audition. Therefore, I assume that's
1,000%.
Just what's you get what I'm trying to say.
Because that's exactly what happened. Because I reached out to I think his agent. This is for Installation, which is the next movie that I'm doing after Intelligent.
Dang.
And it's SAG Ultra Low. And what I'm so excited about this is that we're shooting it in Palm Springs. It's a $130,000 budget, 10-day shoot. I mean, it's scale plus 10 for all the actors, which is 206 a day. And but it's a Hitchcockian. Is
this a Blumhouse model? Are you going for that kind of, or is this
this is the new?
This is just have fun with friends kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's a script that I wrote several years ago. Like I wrote it 2013. I wrote it 13, and my friend Jason Mark, he called me and he said, "Hey, I'm starting a company with a mutual friend of ours." And we're looking to get into like making indie gay films, and we're going to start off doing shorts, and that's why I was asking about the camera, because they were getting a new I think it's the Canon C7. It's whatever the new. I'm not saying like they keep talking about it. Like it sounds great.
It's new. It's new, and they love it. Therefore, you're like, sure, let's go for it.
Right, and of course they know what cameras are. I mean, they know they can pull that thing apart and put it back together again with their eyes closed. And they're very excited about the mark and all those things. So they're looking for a script, and I was like, we want to talk to you about maybe writing something, maybe doing something with us, and because Jason edited Birthday Cake, so he's seen me act.
Okay.
And I said, yeah, or we could do installation. And Jason's like, oh, thank God. I was hoping you were going to say that, because it's a simple shoot. You're in a house. You're at a hero house for like 7 of the 10 days, and a couple of other outside locations. Shooting in Palm Springs super easy because you don't have to worry about parking. We all know people out there. It's like, can I borrow your house? You have to get the permits, obviously, but like it's super, super easy to get done.
Yeah.
We all know like caterers, people. We have friends that are out there. The only thing we'll have to do is like some of the actors, we'll have to put them up in hotels and per diem and all that stuff.
Sure, and you have enough to cover that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but with the shooting in the summer, like a lot of the hotels, it's the off season, so we can get discounted rates, and so we're talking about that.
Because it's hot. It's going to be hot.
Yeah, but we'll be inside for most of it, and then some of the sexier scenes that we'll be outside or in a pool. And but it's a Hitchcockian thriller about an open relationship that a one night stand that goes really, really bad. And the great thing about my crew is they all work in the porn industry.
That is great. So tell me more. Why is that great?
So
how does that work?
Because
I'm not okay.
So
sure.
So my friend Zach has been quietly collecting all this camera grip and electric. So if you're in Palm Springs and need a camera grip and electric, he's been quietly collecting all this camera grip and electric. And he tells me like, yeah, I've got I'm going to be renting out all this gear. And I was like, okay. So I went to visit him in November. He's got a warehouse full of this stuff. I'm like, wow, did you get? He's like, yeah, people just give it to me, and like, he's been buying it up. And he's a photographer, John Pascal, who's a business partner of his. He's a famous photographer, owns the restaurant 849 in Palm Springs. They've just been doing this gear for a period of time. So I mean, it's a lot of gear, and but he owns it, and he's going to be a co-producer of the film. Right. So we're not having to rent anything.
Right, but as far as the benefits of the crew coming from the porn industry,
they're total.
on what the overlap of.
So there is a guy.
So they're used to shooting indie style, is kind of what you're referring to.
The funny thing was I was asking like, what's the daily rate that you pay on people, and he said, we don't really pay daily rates, and I said, what? And he's like, yeah, I mean everything's hourly. Because we don't know if it's going to take like 20 minutes to shoot the scene or 4 hours. And I said, well, imagine it's going to take me 10 hours every day. And so I was like, oh, okay. Like it's just a different mindset of how they work. However, you will be hard pressed to find anyone who is more COVID safe. Like you walk into Zach's studio, like he's taking your temperature. You have to wear a mask. Everybody's 8 feet apart. Like. They've had no issues of COVID the entire time they've shot. Everything is sanitized. COVID compliance was just a huge issue in any production right now. They have their own compliance, so that's a huge load off and huge savings of the film as well. But also, like his crew, the camera grip and electric, they work exactly as if it were, the Intelligent.
Yeah. I almost kind of imagine that they're taking a pay cut to do the film.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
because their hourly rate, I mean, they and they're professionals. They know exactly what they're doing, and the difference with this film, and the one of the main differences is that they tend to have to just get the shot. There's not like a lot of shot lists that they do in advance. Sure. So. But I mean, as far as their camera work goes, and as far as their lighting and editing, Jason. One of the things that I used to tease him about, because I would talk about him in all the festivals, I'm like, I want Jason Mark to edit all my films because because of porn, like he knows how to cut around the bad acting and get straight to the action. So I mean, the editing process. I mean, the full suites, the color correction, everything that goes into making a movie. It's the same technology that they use. So the major difference is sitting down with everybody and exploring the shot list and storyboarding everything, and that's something that we'll have to do with that movie. And I have my little Ken dolls.
Nice.
We're literally like we're shooting the movie with Ken dolls in advance, so we have story because I'm going to be in the movie because I never get to act in stuff that so that way we have storyboards of everything in advance, so there's no question of how to do it. And I'm really excited. And they're just such a great group of guys, and they're so funny and kind, and all of them, I think all of them are sober. Oh, a couple of them. I mean, it's like they're all like grounded, good people that you just want to be around, and they just happen to be porn.
That's definitely the scenario you want when jumping into a project like that. Like you gotta vibe, and definitely everybody's got to buy into the premise, and the passion's got to be there.
And everybody is, because they're excited to do their first like legit, as they keep calling it, the first legit film, and
so
it's exciting. I'm really excited about this.
So, I was going to ask, how are you approaching? Because you got 2 features technically in pre. Then at that point, at this point, is how are you approaching them differently? How are you taking your pre-production experience with The Undertaker's Wife, and like what are you doing differently from that to these two?
I was thinking about that last night, knowing that we were going to be talking about the pre-production process, because we have that entire docuseries to go back and look at. Like this was the process. I was so stressed about the cast that I don't think I was really concerned about pre-production, and I should have been. But I think it was like Heidi was doing the schedule. Jose was costuming the talent. I would go in and like approve things. Igor and I had our office, and we would sit down. And for days, when I was in the office, because I was having to fly back and forth, we would talk about color. We would talk about tones. We would talk about lenses. He and the team went out and shot test shots of stuff, and so that was really the conversations that we had in pre-production. We're still casting.
Because I do, from my perspective, I remember, and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but like as far as shot list and stuff, I do remember we would kind of have like our meeting before we shoot a scene, and we kind of go over like, all right, here's what's happening, and then you'd kind of go over and like point at stuff and block stuff, and then Igor would be like, all right, we got 8 shots.
Yeah.
So is that different now? Are you going into it more with a?
And let me ask you this: was that because we never went into overtime?
Correct.
Except one day where we had to because we lost.
But that was the plan.
Yeah, we knew. Yeah, I don't feel like anybody was thrown by the fact that we didn't have and part of that reason we didn't have a shot list was because we literally just toured the house one time and didn't get to go back into it. So it was like you couldn't really like. I had a video, but there was no real way of shot listing that movie without having spent several days in it and been like, yeah, I think in this scene we'll have her here and him here. I wanted the actors to be able to fill the space and not dictate. Okay, there were a couple of times when I said, okay, I need you to do this and to get to here. Right. That was not always met with the greatest of enthusiasm, but it was because we were outside and losing the light, and we had lost 3 hours because of technical issues. And
to answer your question, I do not think people were thrown by that because our crew, like, it's technically an independent film, and we had a decent budget to play with.
Yeah.
But it still had the indie roots as far as the crew. We're all very familiar with the process of. Me as a script supervisor, I'm like, the shot lists normally go out the window anyway. It's just like, it is nice to sometimes know that there is some
plan.
some initial plan
Yeah.
to start with versus like, all right, here's the like I'm totally down with like, all right, here's what we need to get to cover the scene.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's like, well, I have the vision of this is we're gonna pan from this to reveal this, and this is kind of like the
Right.
visual
Right.
reason, like stuff like that. We kind of went at it with what the crew was comfortable with, and it was just like, all right, we're gonna shoot the coverage, and we're gonna get what we need, and we're gonna cover the script, and this is the general shots of each thing.
Yeah.
And I think we might have gone out of that a few times, and I wasn't sure if it was you or if it was Igor. Like we had some nice like like jib shots that kind
Yeah.
of like here's a big more cinematic scope shot, and I'm not sure where those pitches came from, but
That jib shot, which
that
that was a day.
jibs
Oh god.
jibs and cameras and fun equipment.
And it's always fun to have a docu crew following you during that moment too. But yeah, no, and that shot looks gorgeous with it as well. But it was, I think, I had to completely, and I do trust Igor.
Mhm.
I mean, because his crew is fantastic. Like he can just look at them and they know exactly what they have to do
Mhm.
because they all work together all the time. And also, I wanted the actors to be able to fill the space, and I wanted them to have input as to where they wanted to go. I didn't want to dictate.
Yeah,
like,
flexibility.
yeah, I felt like that was very important to them. And then from there, we were able to, yeah, can you be closer? That way I can do this as a 2-shot as opposed to,
Yeah,
that.
and then they're used to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think with Intelligent, I'm going to keep the same style with that and let the actors fill the room. However, because Installation is such a stylized film,
Mm.
and that it's very Hitchcockian, down to the
Mm.
camera angles, down to the shots. It's stable,
And being that you're acting in it too.
and that I'm acting in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be storyboarded
Okay, that's interesting.
because Hitchcock would storyboard everything.
Yeah, the actors they were they were equipment that got placed and whatever. But
And the actors that I've talked to about the process so far, they're like, love it because they know exactly what they're getting into because of some of the scenes and the scenes involving sexuality and stuff. It's like they'll know exactly what's going to be shown with Ken dolls, but it's that's how we're going to get through
Sure.
it. But also it's because I'm dealing with a crew that's not normally
yeah,
putting a camera on sticks,
Yeah.
so to speak.
I like it. The over planning.
Yeah, that won't be overplanned. Yeah.
Yeah, that it helps too.
And especially because it's 10 days.
Which is the other thing.
Yeah.
It's like we got to get in there. We got to know exactly what we're doing, so we're not experimenting with blocking and giving flexibility to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I've been, for the past year and a half, I've been studying all of Hitchcock's films, reading every book, listening. So down to the shots of like the shoulders and like in moments like how he shot up on certain. So it's like everything is stylized. To
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and you're taking that. That's your direct inspiration for
Yeah.
how you're.
Yeah.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's gonna be fun.
Yeah, no, sounds cool. I was gonna jump to a little bit back to the editing process. Have you edited yourself before? Do you have?
The only editing I do is with iMovie when I have to like cut takes, like self tapes for actors.
And that's more of like a trim.
Yeah, it's a trim. That's all I do. Trim and render.
So yeah, I was curious about what it was like communicating with the editor, being that you already had the stumble blocks of the communication barriers of distance. What did you learn through that process on communication with editing and maybe how to think if any of that influenced how you want to approach your directing on the next stuff too?
Yeah, I read after during pandemic quarantine, I read a lot of books on editing, and so I was fine with I was giving him notes like cut a half breath here, cut a half breath, and it was a lot of for whatever reason, it's like I would watch what he had, and this is not a knock against Gordon, but it's like I'd watch what he did, and I was like, I just needed a half breath cut here, a
Yeah,
half
it's
breath
more like a
cut here.
pacing thing.
It was a pacing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really happy with the pacing of it. And that was really important. The pacing, that movie has to move.
Mm-hmm.
There are some scenes that linger,
Mm-hmm.
and that's because you're trying to catch your breath.
And that's like a moment that needs to stand out.
Yeah,
Versus,
yeah. And one of the big lessons I learned, there's a scene in the movie where it would have worked better had I, and of course it's part of the docuseries as well, I wanted to shoot it as a oneer. And I knew when we got to that day that there was no way it was going to happen. And it was a very long scene. So the editing, of course, it was the scene with...
it's been a bit.
When the killer comes in and he's trying to bury his brother. So it's that office scene between John and Quentin Travis Quentin.
Yeah.
And it's just they're seated for a lot of dialogue, and their performances are great, and the tension's there, the fear is there, the score is great, but it's just a little too long. And because it's like the movie's been moving pretty fast, and then it comes to this scene, so we did have to like cut pieces out of it to make it move faster.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to cut, but there's also a lot of exposition because we're talking about things that he's giving information about what the backstory of who the brother is, and also information that Mark Singer's character is later going to discuss as well. So I learned never to write a scene like that ever again.
So that's more of like a writer lesson on top of the... Yeah, no, that's...
Self-editing myself, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like in Intelligent, there is a 5-page scene where this one actor has to drop all of this exposition, which is the history of the house, but it's so important because his speech will dictate a possible prequel or a possible sequel. Mm-hmm. Because again, it's the whole history of the house.
So you're currently deciding that's staying as a 5-pager for right now.
Now it's down to 4 and a quarter, I think, at this point.
Because I was going to ask about like if there was writer stuff that came up with like, all right, I want to keep the 5 pages, but I'm going to add action to it where they're walking around and looking at this, or like, so that way at least it's visually.
I think that's what we did with. I think that's what we did in Undertaker's Wife with that scene, because we had John Travis get up and grab the Bible and talk about it, and it did give us different levels at that point as well. But
sure. I mean,
I wanted to shoot it as a winner.
It's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so editing. What else? As far as reading the books and stuff, you were. What else you? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm reading this really great. It's William Mann, Tinseltown. Mm-hmm. It's about the history of Hollywood 1920s, and I'm here in Beechwood. And what's funny is like the person who killed this guy lives at the bottom of the hill. So it's like every morning I do my little hike, I get to pass by her house, and it's but it like this book takes place in this neighborhood, so it's like really But it's about the history, and in Intelligent, an actress buys a house in the hills that has a history of infamous murders, and so I'm kind of learning about the deep dive on Hollywood 1920s and 30s.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm just looking through my notes to see what I wanted to jump to next. There's a couple things. I'll throw some out and see what grabs you. Okay, well, since you were mentioning writing, I haven't seen this full show yet, but so don't spoil anything for me. But WandaVision, you posted on Facebook about it, and I was very happy with, because I'm a big Marvel fan.
Yeah.
So you kind of joked about like, what am I doing as a writer? Like, I almost want to give up on writing because of what WandaVision's doing.
Yeah.
So I was what?
It's so good, and I mean, I'm not I've watched the Marvel. I'm not a Marvel fan. Mm-hmm. I mean, I thought Endgame, that scene with the portals at the end, that was bonkers beautiful. I love the mythology. I appreciate the storytelling that they spent all these years creating these characters to get to that point. I'm excited to see what they do with it later. I'm excited to get these big name actors who seem to have a lot of fun. I'm excited they shoot it in Atlanta.
Right.
I auditioned for WandaVision, but the problem, of course, you're not allowed to talk about these things, but it's already aired. And so they send you sides. And there was on Clubhouse, I was listening to somebody last night, I think it was Paul Guillotte. I think he was the one who was talking about it. These writers that when they create fake sides for auditions, it's to give you an arc because they want to see what you can do with it.
Right.
And I don't think I'm telling tales out of school by saying that whenever you audition for a Marvel show, you have to sign an NDA in advance so that you don't talk about what happens in the story.
And give spoilers.
You're not giving anything away. And that's before you even get the sides. Like, you have to sign the NDA in advance. And then you get these, like, watermarked, so deep that you can barely read the dialogue as it is. And then the scene makes no damn sense. They give you no setup as to what's happening in the scene. And they give you no indication as to, is this a comedy? Mm-hmm. Is this supposed to be... And the scene that I had was one of those scenes from the first episode, which was that stylized TV show. And so reading the sides, I'm like, I have no idea what the hell is going on. And also knowing that it seemed like it was an old-timey kind of thing, but knowing that these were the characters of Wanda and... I figured out that it was WandaVision at that point, because that was the first show to shoot in Atlanta. But I'm like, how does this tie to what those characters are in the universe? Like, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Because they hadn't necessarily announced what the premise of the show was. So that would be a weird scenario.
Yeah. And I mean, all of my, people, a lot of in Atlanta, like, people will read opposite each other and tape, self-tape for these auditions. And we're all like scratching our heads, like, how do you play this? This doesn't make any sense. Like, and also, like, it doesn't make any sense within the world. And then when you watch the episode, it's like, oh, okay, well, that would have been helpful. That would have been helpful to have said, it's a 1950s sitcom set, and this is what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But of course, they don't tell you that because that's part of the spoiler of the show, and it's that way with all of the shows. Like that you get these sides, and it's like, okay, and of course it's a code name for the show. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can figure out what the show is based on the code name, but even then, it's like you can't really. So it was a really interesting conversation on Clubhouse last night where they were talking about, if that's the case, if these are the sides that you get, play the sides. Just play.
Sure.
Create your own world, create your own character, because that's what they want to see.
Yeah, again, make decisions, stick with it, commit. The classic. But yeah.
Which of course we all do, but it's like it's that frustrating thing because you want to nail it, and you don't want to think of like, yes, obviously as an actor, you know that you have to go in and make your own choices and whatnot. And I've never been in the situation of not being able to give an actor direction as to what's happening, it's helpful to give the actor direction. It's give us something. Just give us something. Or say, play. Go for it. There's no right or wrong in this scene. We just want to see you act. We just want to see you move. We just want whatever the thing is. But of course with this and with all the Marvel stuff, there's no indication as to what's happening in the scene. Everything's blacked out.
Yeah, because I know even when you get to set sometimes, like Tom Holland will be like, so what am I looking at? How tall is this thing? Like where? Like what's going on?
Brie Larson talked about that when she shot her first take with her line was "Where's Fury?" And and she was like, so she's like, so you're just gonna stand here and then you're looking at 4 people and who are not in the room and you're gonna say "Where's Fury?" She's like, okay. She's like, well, wait, where's Fury? Like, is he like where like is he around? Like, is he not here? She's like, who are the people I'm looking at? Like, she had no information.
It's like, good luck.
And that was the big tease of the next episode. That was the tag. And she had no idea what she was doing.
Yeah, because as far as WandaVision goes, I'm currently, I think, through episode 4.
Okay, so you're on the other side of it.
So, yeah, I'm through the Halloween episode. My plan was to stack up the remaining and watch it like as a movie. Yeah. And I haven't gotten to it yet, which I'm very frustrated about. But I'll get to it soon. But regardless, I think your comment came out when they did the spoil. I don't know. I'll spoil because you've watched it. Yeah. Because they did the reveal of the other brother showing up, like the other multiverse brother. Yeah. And I think that's at point that I feel like it was that night that you put the comment up. So I was like, I wonder what prompted the actual Facebook post. Was it the writing
Oh, you
of
know what
the?
it was? No, it was the scene. It was episode 4 when they finally revealed, like at the beginning, uh, Monica, when they revealed like where she was fitting into the story, and they go back like she had just come back from the snap, and that it moved because we had
Okay,
been
yeah,
watching
yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
like these damn episodes, these TV shows don't make any damn sense, and then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly it's like
Right, right.
okay, like suddenly everything made
Mm-hmm.
sense, and it's like they've tricked you into this. You think that it's this one thing and it's this whole other thing, and then they bring it back like Kat Dennings and Randall Park, and like they're bringing back all these people that you love,
It's too much fun, man.
and you can tell the actress playing Monica Rambeau is just having a blast.
Mm-hmm.
Like and she's going to be, a new big star in the universe, and what they're planning on doing with their character. So it's like, it was fun. And of course, Catherine Hahn is a friend of mine from Crossing Jordan. So it was like, we taped a reunion for Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight, and Catherine's not on social media. So like when you text her like, "Oh my God, you've been trending all day," she's like, "What does that mean?" She has no idea. She doesn't understand Twitter.
She's like, "What's Twitter?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now she's like, this show has like put her in a different stratosphere, and she's so good. And I can't wait for you to see what happens with her.
I'm stoked. I'm excited.
She's so good.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I would be, what's the word, remiss if I didn't ask this is, I don't know, I feel like it's a boring question because it doesn't mean much to me, but casting director, what's the, as far as more like frequently asked question kind of stuff I have plenty of friends that are in the same creative hustle and are pursuing the acting side, and I feel like acting is, I don't know how, if you kind of list out the difficulties of positions, like acting is definitely, I feel like, near the top of having any control over your existence.
Oh yeah, totally. It's yeah.
So trying to figure out what to do, what matters, getting an agent, getting representation. If I'm not SAG, they won't even look at me.
Right.
Like all this kind of stuff. So like getting to know casting directors, getting on a radar.
Yeah.
Like,
are you on Clubhouse?
I am.
Am I following you on Clubhouse?
I don't think so.
I have to find.
I don't know. Maybe we can do that.
It's one of those things that started off like really great, and now it's like I feel like it's just people like trying to exercise their therapy.
I feel like I jumped on late because that's what I jumped on. I jumped into some different rooms, and I think I had a friend kind of joke about she tweeted that she's like, yeah, through high school, like my skincare, like my acne was really bad, and I tried all this different stuff, and then like somebody pops up and says like, well, have you tried washing your face with like soap? And she's like, that's what Clubhouse is like.
Totally, yeah.
So it's like, well, it's like, thank you, but this isn't really helping.
Right, and there's a lot of casting directors that are on it now, and like Paul Guyot and Guyot, I think is how you say his last name, showrunner from, he's a writer, yeah. I thought it was Guyot, and then somebody said it. Like somebody said his name yesterday. I was like, that's not at all how I thought it was said. He's really great because he talks about writing, and but there's a lot. Michelle Lewitt, who's a casting director, she was on Undertaker's wife. They're on there. They're giving really great advice. But it's like a lot of these rooms, when you go in, there's like 80 people on the stage, and they're all like agents, managers, casting directors, and then they'll bring in somebody. Like last night, I was like, Jesus, woman. It was like an AA meeting. Like she gone in like, I just want to thank you for your share. Thank you for the and they're talking about like, I want to thank you for the knowledge. And then she's like, and then she finally gets to her question. And it's like, this is like your therapy session. This is not just spit out the question. And so yeah, it's one of those resources that I think is just there's too many voices in the room. But back when it first started, it was
people
fun.
Are still learning the medium for sure.
But I find it very helpful because it's like. I'm learning really good, especially because the LA market is very different from the Atlanta market.
Okay.
Because and weirdly so, because I feel like I know everybody from casting. I feel like I know a good chunk of all of the actors from the market, from seeing them, from communicating with their agents. talent that I don't know, that's on them because I'm the most accessible casting director in the Southeast. I'm on all the social media platforms. I do Facebook Lives where I have people ask me questions. And that's on them if they don't want to, like, and that's, again, that's like how you meet people, like on Clubhouse. I know a lot of casting directors have said, yeah, I'm following you now. That would never happen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. But for some reason, Clubhouse has made it like more of a conversation. So you realize these people are crazy or they're not. And like there's somebody that you want to like get to know a little better peripherally.
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna say, yeah. How much do you factor in social media presence to? Yeah.
I want to say that I don't, but I absolutely do.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Danielle Pennick and Lanisa Frederick, who were in Undertaker's wife. Danielle played the tech person who was like putting in the Wi-Fi and everything.
Right.
And then Lanisa was the volunteer who came to help with all the funerals. They're both part of #booked. And I met them through Instagram, and they're both going to be megastars one day. And I'm sure they're going to have their own show within 2 or 3 years, if not sooner. And I found them through social media. And there's this actress, her name is Mackenzie.
Is she the one you've been sharing about lately?
God,
You're like,
I'm
oh my gosh,
so
you're
obsessed
hilarious.
with her.
Yeah.
I'm upset.
I like the thing that you shared. I'm like, that's actually pretty good.
She does these. All she does is she talks at herself, and but she's got the branding down. Like it's the same setup every time, where she's singing these lullabies, and then her other persona is telling her how bad these lullabies are, and it's this like overly dramatic thing. But you can tell this is a bitch who can act. She is good. And like I IMDb searched her and I'm like, why don't you have an agent? She's like, I can't find an agent. I'm like, how do you not have an agent? She's got millions of followers and views on these videos and she doesn't have an agent. And I'm like, somebody in New York needs to snap her up. If she was in LA, I would cast her in a heartbeat. She would be in The Intelligent. Like, pick a role. Which would you like to play? She's somebody I found through social media. There's an actress named Nikki Garza. I actually met Nikki. Nikki attended a class that I taught years ago in Savannah, and then she, you know, newbie actor, like newbie, like didn't have an agent, just striking out. She came in. I was doing in-person auditions last year for Florida Girls right after we, after we finished shooting. I had 2 weeks where I was casting Florida Girls before the world shut down, and Nikki drove in from Atlanta to Savannah to do an in-person with me. All the Atlanta actors I had self-tape. She's from Atlanta. But she drove down just to meet me and or meet with me again because she'd taken my class years earlier and blew me away. Like, she was going to be this character had we shot the series. And since then, she's become this gigantic TikTok star. And she's body positive. You know, she's not a size 2, and she knows it. And she's gorgeous, and she is funny, and she is such a talented actor. There was a film that I was hired to direct last fall that did not end up going because of COVID. And she was the very last person that I had requested her to audition through the casting director. And so the day of the callbacks, when we were Zooming everybody, all the producers are there and myself, and I was like, where's Nikki? And she's like, oh, I couldn't get to her agent in time. I was like, well, call her agent right now and see if she can do it. And so the agent like calls her and is like, she's actually, would you guys mind like FaceTiming her? And Nikki does a FaceTime audition from the backseat of a car. Her partner's loading the trunk from like, they're at Walmart. The focus that she had, there's a dog that's jumping up and down, like a little chihuahua that's jumping up and down in the back part of the car. It was the funniest audition I've ever. I mean, she was the only actor that day. I was like, that's the character. That's done. Sign her now. She was the first decision that we made, and of course the movie didn't happen.
And that was a combo of the performance given as well as the circumstance of the commitment for the audition, like that combination.
Yeah, I mean, she had the character down, but it was the focus of all of these extraneous things happening, right. And she was so and like was in a t-shirt and like in the backseat of a car. I mean, it was like it was the perfect callback, and but had she not had that experience in the audition, had she not Again, casting director workshops, never a guarantee. It's an educational purposes only. Da 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 da. But that's how I first met her. And then and again, I brought her in because she is a good actress. She was right for the role. We were looking for a Hispanic actress for this role.
And the span between the two,
3 years.
3,
Yeah. 3 years, I think, because she attended one of the first workshops I did in Savannah. And I remembered her, and it was like, when she came into the room, I was like, oh, you were here before, and that's why I thought she lived in Savannah, because she had attended the workshop in Savannah, and but she's been taking classes. She can act. She is funny. She does have a following, and so I get inspired by actors that are on. I hate TikTok, but I'm obsessed with it. But I love creators that can find something, that can use their voice, and that create funny things that make you laugh, like Mackenzie, or it's not necessarily always about dance challenges or lip syncing to something.
Sure.
But when actors are able to take that, like Mackenzie, she doesn't have an agent, so she's out there creating her own content. Those are the people that you want to help. Those are the people that you want to see succeed.
Yeah, it always reminds me of the classic quote, people enjoy helping those that are already helping themselves, kind of thing. Yeah. No, I mean, I was just curious. I feel like that's kind of like a common thought in terms of like when I'm on Instagram and stuff and I'm stumbling upon actors or whatever, like I know it's, again, like, it's weird, like, it's not quite fun having this opinion, but like you can look at the, like, all right, what's the content they're putting out? How do they present themselves? When they are putting out videos, what videos are they putting? What self-tapes are they sharing? Like, all that kind of stuff on. And then how do they caption the thing? Like, I'm like, how do they represent the thing that they just put?
Yeah.
I look into it very, very deeply, and I don't. It's kind of stressful, I'm sure. For authenticity.
I think that watching and it's just the way that our with TV shows not being able to shoot, it's people creating their own content. It is important. Web series used to be the big thing, and now it's it's on your phone. So it's yeah. So I guess so. The advice, little snippet of advice. You were kind of saying, like, just kind of Clubhouse is a great place, or it was a great place. Yeah.
As far as an actor trying to get some new seeds of inspiration.
Clubhouse is now like the free casting director workshop. I mean, it's because you're out, you can communicate with them, you're getting great advice, you're getting to hear exactly what they want or what they don't want, and you're getting to learn like what the markets are, because the LA market's very different from the Atlanta market. And in Atlanta we have maybe I would say we have, and they'll probably hate me for saying this, we probably have 6 or 7 casting directors that cast all of the work that happens in Georgia, in the Southeast. Like Erica Arvold, she's out of Richmond, but she does some work in Atlanta occasionally. She helps cast Dope Sick out of Atlanta, so we'll get auditions for Dope Sick out of Atlanta. But the Finn Cannons, Chase and Tara, who are a company, Chase Paris and Tara Feldstein, they cast a lot of the work. You're beholden to these group of like 5 or 6, 7
like
people.
Like, it feels like gatekeepery. Yeah.
And in Atlanta now,
quotes.
We are casting more and more because of COVID, and which is now going to change the face of casting in the Southeast. They are casting more series regulars and guest stars out of the Atlanta market, which 2 and 3 and 4 years ago was never happening. We were only getting co-star spots, and now they're, we're casting.
Yeah, it's grown enough to where they can pull from.
Yeah. Like the kids on Outer Banks, I think all of those kids were cast out of the Southeast, and now they're all huge stars, and that is a blessing and a curse, I think, because a lot of actors tend to and I'm only speaking from my experience, but a lot of my friends who are working actors, they work all the time. And then there are people that like are trying to struggle to get into, like, you get that self-tape and you're like, this is going to be the one. And then you find out it's somebody who's always working that books that role.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating because I'm the kind of person, like, I always try to push through new talent. So they do get their first credits. Like in Savannah, I had to, because we couldn't afford to bring every actor in from Atlanta and put them up with housing, lodging, and per diem. So I'm always trying to help grow the market, get an actor get their credits. I'm trying to go out of my way to like find those people that are good, that can be on set, that can go toe to toe with Channing Tatum. That whether it's not, yes, you always want the best actor there, but sometimes you have to bring somebody up, and you always hope that that's going to be something that happens, that some other casting director is going to be like, you know what, you haven't worked in 3 years. Let me fight for you on this role. But it's not the case. It's just not the case.
Yeah.
And like, I've auditioned for every gay husband or boyfriend of a series regular that's come through Atlanta in the past 2 years. And they keep bringing these actors in from New York and LA. And that actor does not necessarily have any more value than I do. And it's frustrating.
Right. I know. Because I did a tiny bit of research prepping for this, but like you've mentioned before that I don't know, it's kind of I got the vibe there where it's like, I don't know how much it plays into it, but being that you are also a casting director.
Oh, where did you see that quote?
might play a part into
why I'm not getting
why
cast.
You're not getting cast.
Because
they know who you are, and
it's
weird.
And it sucks. Where did I say that?
I don't know.
Oh my God, I better go back and find that quote. But it's true. It's like, I do feel like a lot of times I'm getting auditions and I'm like, you're never gonna fucking hire me for this. I wouldn't hire me for this. I feel like, and again, this is just my insecurity. I feel like it's a dance monkey dance kind of thing.
Well, wouldn't it be? Well, if you wouldn't bring yourself in for that, I'm talking about the situations in which you would bring yourself in for that, but you're not getting brought in.
Yeah.
Like, that's more of the issue, right?
And I'm grateful to my agent, because I know that he's out there pushing me. I know that he is 110% behind me. I know that he would not put me up for something if he didn't think that I was right for it. I know that, and sometimes I booked things and I'm like, I'm never going to book this, and then I book it.
Right.
And, or it's like, I'll get the audition. I'm like, I would never cast myself in this, but I know how to make it my own, which is what you have to do. I mean, you can't ever. It's not fair to yourself, and it's not fair to the casting director or your team to be like, why am I doing this? I mean, you can have that moment, but you still have to go in and give it your best take. And it's an opportunity for you to get to explore and play and work, and it's like free class, getting to create this character and work on it, and then forget it and go eat Mexican food. But that has definitely been a gigantic frustration of mine, because I do theater and I get great reviews, and yet I can't book a fucking one-liner on The Resident. And it's real frustrating.
So is there, I guess I'm sure, how is it for the LA side? Do you audition out here too?
No, I don't know. No, and I think, depending on my schedule, I might start looking for an agent out here. But I do, like, a lot of actors in Atlanta who get frustrated, who aren't working, they end up moving to LA and then suddenly start booking all the time, working in Atlanta.
Oh, I got you.
So that happens quite a bit.
As long as the work comes with the move, it's kind of
But that's my main reason why I'm doing installation as well. So like, I have current reel material, but I also can act and create my own things, and I think that's why we all have to create our own stuff.
Taking your own advice, yeah, the stuff that you like about the people that you're spotting on Instagram or whatever, making their own. I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
And I don't think that I'm totally comfortable acting in installation, but I don't want to, at this point, start acting in stuff that I'm directing. Like, I just don't feel. I definitely wouldn't have felt comfortable in Undertaker's Wife, like being my first sort of bigger budget film and acting opposite those two when they had just come in like hours earlier. Like, oh, and by the way, I'm going to be playing the role of the 6-page thing. That wouldn't have been that wouldn't have been right. And same thing with Intelligent. Like, there's a couple of roles in Intelligent that I could play. I just. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was gonna ask actually, was there a point when you considered not directing it and being like, I want to act and I'll kind of like almost act as producer and actor, and then bring in somebody that you trust to handle that side of it? And
no. No. And the funny thing is, because I have a script right now that's being shopped this week, that the whole thing came about as just it's going to be a great story one day. But like, I was in Savannah, I was working on this film that I was not having a good time on. I witnessed this interaction between two people, and the next morning, the producer friend of mine calls me. He's like, "Do you have a Christmas movie for Hallmark or Lifetime?" I was like, "No, I don't. No, I don't. I don't do that. But let me tell you about what happened to me last night." So I tell him about the incident. He's like, "Oh my God, that sounds like a movie." And I was like, "Yeah, it's called No Room at the Inn." And as soon as because everything in Hallmark is like, it's at the inn or something. The second that I said that, the entire movie downloaded into my head, and it was all based just on seeing these two people at a restaurant. And I was like, "I'll call you back in an hour." So I literally birthed this 5-page treatment in the course of an hour, sent it to him. He's like, "So you did have this movie?" I was like, No. This came from like me saying No Room at the Inn. And so now they're in the process of shopping it. So I did, like, they love it. They make these Hallmark Lifetime TV One shows all the time. The lead partner in this company was like, "Great, and we'll get so and so to direct it." And I was like, "But I want to direct it. Like, I want to direct it." And
so you said that.
I did, but I also know well enough to step out of the way, because if this other director who has directed a lot for Hallmark and Lifetime is going to help greenlight the movie, then welcome aboard.
Sure.
I'm not gonna muck up the system.
Yeah, especially if you have other stuff going on too. It's like, well, yeah, if that was the only thing happening, I could see fighting for it. But it's like, well, you got this, and
Yeah.
No, for sure.
Yeah, and it's like,
but that wasn't. Yeah. Okay.
But it's exciting. It's really crazy that like it's going out this week, and I mean there are lots of conversations happening about it, where it could be on your television this Christmas.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. What did I have? I had a follow up ready to go. I don't know. I don't necessarily. Okay, I'll mention. Is this the one, Christmas at Big Bear? Is that the?
That's yeah, okay. And it's not and it's because of
Christmas in Big Bear.
Christmas in Big Bear, yeah, and it was because I called it No Room at the Inn, but these guys, I mean, they know Hallmark Lifetime. They thought, yeah, it needs to be something more Christmassy, so it's.
So you literally just put Christmas in it.
Yeah.
And there's also Trailer Park Murder Club.
I'm still trying to get that done.
That's in the writing phase?
It's in the writing phase, yeah. It's basically like Clue in a trailer park with a bunch of women. I had a movie called Darlene that we tried to get made for years, and Mary Lambert was going to direct it. And over the past I wrote it right after the election of 2016. And it was really about the former president's country and those people that tend to live in trailer parks.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And so, and it was we had a great little cast of people attached to make it. Producer just never had the money. The landscape of where we are in 2021 and where we were in 2016 is completely different. You cannot make this movie now. Based on things that happen in the movie.
So you're kind of trying to rework it so it does.
Yeah, so and people still want to make that movie, and I'm like, I'm arguing with them, like, you can't make this movie now. Like, not in the middle of when we're trying to like educate people on Black Lives Matter, and we're trying to educate people on I literally cannibalize the script. Like I'm taking the characters, putting them in a different situation, but the situation that was in that original script it was definitely documented a period of time where we are, but
Yeah.
nobody wants to see that movie now.
Yeah. I
So,
feel you. Man. Okay. So what? Being that you are up to so much in terms of like acting, putting yourself, yeah, acting in this feature. You're like you said, you're still dabbling in casting, trying to get out
yeah,
of casting. You've got some cool. You've directed your first. Well, you directed a feature as of late, waiting for that to see what happens with that.
yeah.
You're making your second with that same production company. What does Chad? What's the dream? Like what's the is it the acting side, the directing side, writing? Is it the trifecta? Well, you may.
I think it's the writing, producing, and directing, and acting. And the thing is, like 2020 when I moved to
Mhm.
LA, in 2020, 2000 when I
Mhm.
moved to LA, 21 years ago, um, I wanted to move out here to be a writer and then get back into acting. And I'm still in that process of like, trying to
Mhm.
write and trying to get back into acting. And like, I've been able to do theater and that's been very fulfilling and I love that. But it's what I love about acting, and with you, I want to ask you the same question. What I love about acting is the trickster part of it. That's what I'm drawn to. I'm not drawn to it for being famous. I don't. It's not like that. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be. That's never been something
Mhm.
that I've been attracted to. What I love is the disappearing part into a character where people don't recognize you, and
Mhm.
that's why playing Hedwig was so much fun
Mhm.
because you want people to at the end of the show say, "I didn't see any of you in that character." That's the biggest compliment you can give me. And the same thing with David O. Selznick. Like it was I mean, yeah, we still kind of look alike. I dyed my hair black and never do that again. Uh, um, uh, and it was I totally researched. I felt like I embodied exactly who he was on the day. Um, but with Hedwig, what was really fun was like I'd never done drag before. I'd never walked in heels before. I'd never sung punk rock before.
Mhm.
Um, Never done a German accent before. Like all of these things, I had to lose weight. I had to get in shape. It was it was a process for two
Yeah, yeah,
years doing it.
transformative. Yeah.
Transformative, yeah. And the best part, the greatest compliment I ever had was from Mark Amin, who was the director on Emperor. I cast that movie 2 years ago, and he came to see. We did reshoots, and so we shot the movie in Savannah. We did reshoots in Atlanta, and he wanted to come see the show with all the producers. So as people often do, they're like, "Hey, we're running 10 minutes late," like texting me, like I'm gonna hold the house for them. Like that's something I do. And like they had roped off the front row,
Mhm.
and it was one of those theaters where like once the show starts, like you can't really come in
Mm.
because I'm all over the stage and the audience. And so we did hold for them to come in. And I get up, I'm doing singing Tear Me Down, come on stage, and into the first monologue, talking to the audience. And I look down and I see Mark, like he's got the program and he's like talking to the producer next to him. And she keeps pointing like in the front row and she keeps pointing like that, like emphatically pointing. And he's like, I don't, and I'm like, at one point I was like, I
Mm.
wanted to turn because Hedwig talks to the audience, and be like, "What the fuck are you doing? What are you talking about? What?" And I'm up here. Would you please shut up? Because I had to do that a lot with the drunks because there were a lot of
Oh, okay.
because people would come in and drink and get really drunk and talk back because they think it's interactive and it's not. Like there's a
Mhm.
script we're fitting to here. Um, so when the show was over, I walk through the audience and or I am coming back to the dressing room, and Mark comes running across the stage and he goes, "I didn't know that was you," and I was like, "I was literally 6 feet from you. How did you not know that was me?" And like he just with the hair and the makeup and the voice, like he didn't. He honestly, honest to God, did not know that was me, which made me wonder a lot about him. But the producers were like, they were like, it was so funny that he was convinced that that wasn't you, and he was wondering where you were.
Yeah, which is why the pointing was happening. It's like, where's Chad? And it's like
Yeah, and
that guy.
that
Like that's him right
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah, and he just didn't get it. And I mean, I'd worked with the man for 4 months, and so that was like the greatest compliment. And then the other great compliment was that Hedwig's drinking throughout the show, And so we had this giant bottle of like a vodka bottle and just have water inside of it. And there was one night that we had a new person that was working the bar, and the water bottle like went missing. So somebody went and borrowed a bottle of. They had real vodka in the bottle, and I did a big chug of it, and like it just burned my throat, and I was like, I need the water to drink for the show for my voice. I'm like, I can't drink this, and I was like, it became a whole thing. So I'm drinking water the entire show. And there was one night, it was an industry night. So like my agents came, a bunch of actors from my agency came. I knew everybody in the house. I knew every single person in the house. It was the greatest show we had the entire run.
Oh,
but
nice.
my agent, Jason Lockhart, like after the end of the show, like he comes up to me and like he pulls me aside and he goes, buddy, you need to be really careful. I'm like, about what? And he's like, you don't need to be drinking that much on stage. I'm like, it's water, Jason. Like, but he honestly thought that I was drunk. I'm like, I would be dead if I drank that much vodka on stage while doing that show. And that was like the second greatest compliment I had with my agent, like thinking that I was
people getting confused because you're doing such a great job.
Yeah. Playing drunk is fun. Like but that was really like, wow, you really thought that, because the play runs in real time, so it's like for an hour and a half they thought that Hedwig was just getting really, really sloshed. And then Hedwig becomes a completely different person, and so I'm like, wow, thanks, Jason. Yeah, no, I'm not up there drinking, but thank you. I appreciate that.
No, for sure. Okay, so I'm trying to recall if you answered the question or not. But so acting is so yeah, always kind of working your way back to that. Like that's what you moved to LA to pursue.
Yeah.
Writing is a
I love writing. I love creating.
And that's what the expectation of acting, and you don't really write pieces to act in per se.
Installation, yes.
Right.
And the thing about installation is I wrote that role knowing that I would, and the thing also with Birthday Cake, I wrote both of these roles knowing that nobody would ever cast me in this role. And the interesting thing about Birthday Cake and Groom's Cake was Birthday Cake. We played at the Palm Springs Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. There was this huge party afterwards. It was because we were like the anchor night of that. Movies have been playing for 3 days, but we were the anchor for that night. So after we played, we went to this party, and like the whole cast is there. They had come in from Palm Springs. We'd rented a house, and so a lot of people were staying in the house and had a pool. Reb Hillis is a model. Like he played my husband. People bought our relationship because he was playing a movie star or playing a TV star, like a soap star, and I'm playing a writer. So people bought that relationship. But as I was walking out, the partner to a photographer, a well-known photographer in Palm Springs, we're no longer Facebook friends. He comes up to me and he says, "I'm really surprised that you cast yourself in the movie." And I was like, what? And like, this was a party. Like, people had been drinking. And he goes, yeah, I just didn't buy your relationship because Reb Hillis would never be with someone who looks like you. You should have cast somebody hotter. And I wanted to put my fist through the back of this guy's skull. I'm like, wow, you really just said that to me. And it was, I had such an insecurity for like a year.
That is mean. That is very mean. So, yeah. So when you say you want to you want to write something where you can cast yourself in a position that most people wouldn't consider you for.
Yeah.
That sounds. It's
the risk that you take.
No, for sure. I like that because that's the opportunity that you create is no one else is going to give this to me. Let me give it to myself versus write something that of course I get cast for. Like that's kind of a little defeats the purpose of the chance you're taking. Yeah,
and the first, when, in fact, we had premiered, the time that party went down, the Birthday Cake happened, I was in the process of trying to get installation made. And at the time, Jo Weil, who's a German actor, he was going to play the role of Charlie. And it didn't work out, schedule and financially, to make it work. But I had this like in the back of my head. I'm like, oh my God, everybody thinks I'm unattractive. Nobody thinks I'm hot enough to to play a lead, and that kind of and I had that for years, and it wasn't until Brie Larson, when she was like on one of those actors roundtables the year that she was doing Room, she said, "Yeah," she goes, "I couldn't get auditions for years." She goes, "I wasn't character enough to be character, and I wasn't attractive enough to be a leading lady." And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"That has been my entire life," and it was that was sort of her saying that. I was like, that was kind of a game changer moment for me, hearing that.
Yeah, it just is
getting out of my head.
Yeah, just pushing forward and doing what you do, and yeah. That's when I say acting is it's difficult. I'm like the stuff. Yeah, that's the scariest part about acting, because talk about me a little bit. I was gonna say, when I first got into film, because I don't think we talked about this much. We didn't have much time to talk on set,
right.
But I wanted to pursue the acting side first, so I took and I was in Reno, Nevada, so there's no opportunity really. There's the community theater, and commercial work. So I was taking I took acting 101 in my final semester of college, and that kind of spurred that back in. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I can do this, and I did a couple of plays, and I trying to work through capitalizing on who you are while also finding out who you are and what you have to offer, and all those kinds of mind tricks of being likable and being wanted, and working through all that. So then I started doing my thing where I would produce content and write content and direct content for me to act in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I quickly learned that actually the acting side is not for me. I don't want that. Put somebody in front of the camera that wants to be there. I'm happy to do the collaboration and make you look good and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of what I fell into. But I did explore acting for a couple of years and work through that kind of stuff. So so that's why I try my best to put myself in a position where where I understand where everybody around me on set is going through. It's okay, I've acted. That is difficult, and I respect everything that you're doing. In the same way as when you're directing, it's I've directed, I know exactly what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to back you up and offer all that support. And I've AD'd features. Of course script supervised. I've produced my own feature, and I've edited my own feature and edited a bunch of shorts. So getting everything in my toolbox so I can better communicate in all those elements. So when you were saying you were going to, as far as my dream is the directing side primarily, where I like being the central hub of the communication and really relying on other people's abilities to be awesome, and just be all right, you do your thing.
Yeah.
I'm just here to be the glue to keep us all together. So that's where I vibe the most. But when I was in Reno, I stayed with the craft of film up there for maybe 2013 is when I took Acting 101. And then I was producing content with the community and then I moved here in 2018. So 5 years, and I got 70 short films shot and pumped out through the community and stuff, and that was my film school, was just making stuff, learning on the job. And so through that process, I was kind of the local showrunner head that would greenlight little short films and crew it up, and sometimes I would direct, sometimes I'd ask somebody else to direct, so we wouldn't have the burnout issue. So I definitely have the experience of I've worked with many directors with many levels of experience, and I love the craft of the collaboration on just making stuff and getting people together and doing my part to help. Just, all right, we're on the project, let's make this thing as good as possible. What's the vision? Let's make that happen, and either assembling the community or assembling the people that we have and being there. So that's why I feel like I'm a really good script supervisor, because I have that previous experience with walking through many productions and just being there to support. It's it's not my show, and changing the gears in my head where I'm not the hub here. Chad's the hub. let me do my best because I know what he's going through and make it happen. So those are my favorite two positions: is the support role, and then also having the chance to be the glue too. So
It's
my pillars.
the collaboration part on the film as a director. I love that part. I love hearing what people want to bring to the table. And like right now, we're getting images back from the visual effects makeup. So I'm listening to like special effects makeup that will be the creature, and it's like obviously I want that designer to come to the table, give me ideas. I've been sending some inspiration stuff as well that I saw like in New Orleans, and so we're back and forth like that. Where I want to make sure that everybody's having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure that we're respectful of everybody's time.
Mm-hmm.
I never want people like I have been on sets before where nobody is watching the clock, and like I want people to get home and be able to watch television or have time with their family or their partner, or like I obviously we have to get everything on camera, but I want us to move as quickly as possible so that, but not that we're putting the actors in danger or that they're like they have the time to process and do what they want to do. But I'm always mindful of everybody's time. And I learned some things on Undertaker's Wife that moving forward with the next movie will be very different about scheduling, and like I understand that like it's the AD's job to schedule things out, but I need to be consulted on and I think a lot of it was the fact that it's like, oh, it's just his first film, so
we'll do it for him, kind of thing.
Yeah, and there were days when I was and I should have been more assertive and said, I don't want this happening on this day because of this reason, or I need more time to shoot this scene because of this reason, and I should have been more assertive with what I wanted and what I needed. I think a lot of times people mistake my kindness for weakness, and that's a big mistake.
Yeah, so that would be like pre-production communications, right?
Yeah.
It's like, all right, AD and even DP, let's all get on the chat and talk through what my expectations are and what I think is important, and then really being like, all right, sweet, this is how we can work with that, or this is what we have to push back against that because of this, and yeah, no, that sounds right. Because I was going to ask about Undertaker's Wife was slated for 15 days, and we got done
14 days.
In 14 days, and that's the lesson you were talking about, right?
That was a big lesson I learned, and I've been very vocal about it. And David's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
But I will never do that again. Don't become the hero of your own movie, because that was a big lesson. Because we were, we were shooting again. We never had overtime.
Well, okay, because that's where the two things are fighting against each other in the brain, right? It's like, I respect the time. So then what's the thing over here where it's like, well, we have the time.
Yeah.
So let's find that balance of not going into OT, but maybe what can we, like, what's the lesson there? Or what would you have done differently?
And the thing is, like, I'm like, obviously when we have the AD hired on Intelligent, like that person will do a schedule. But I told David, I'm like, but this time, we're going to have a conversation about the schedule, and like,
sure, of course,
because we can't have actor working day 1 and actor working day 15. Schedule-wise, that's just we can't, because there will be on 3 weekly contracts. Like that's
sure
something we can't do.
So that's like producer stuff.
It's producer stuff, and like obviously we have an actor who's coming in from London, and we're dealing with his visa right now, which has been a nightmare. It has nothing to do with him. It's the government. And so we don't know when we're going to start shooting based on that. And so we're going to try to front load the scenes that he's not in and then shoot the other scenes. But then 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, we could find out that we have his visa for April 1st, and that's fine. But we have to do a schedule based on him. And the big lesson learned, and I mean, this is a podcast for educational reasons, and much like the docuseries that we shot as well. One of the biggest lessons that I learned was being respectful of people's time. I had said, and Julian came on set one day. He's on camera saying, yeah, they keep wrapping, in under 8 hours. Like I wanted to make sure that they're actually shooting a movie.
Oh,
And,
right.
and we were, because the great thing was actors, we would communicate. We knew exactly what we wanted out of the scene. We'd go in, we'd shoot it. We didn't, there were certain scenes I didn't want a lot of coverage. I wanted it to be a two-shot. And Shannon had respectfully said that she does not like a lot of takes. And as long as you're giving me what I want, I will welcome aboard, sister.
Sure.
So, I mean, she had respect, when I asked the actors, like, what do you want? What do you like? Some actors do like a lot of takes, just so they have time to warm up. Shannon was a pro. Shannon would hit it, first couple of takes. And she'd ask me, like, is that what you're looking for? Or are we on the right note? And so, I mean, that was part of the reason we got so far ahead, was because John and Shannon and the other cast.
And Igor was quick too.
And Igor was so
because that's a big part of it, is like
so quick,
is setting up lights and all of that, and that, like you said, the crew, he would just look and they'd move.
There were so many times during the docuseries where it's like, I ask him, like, how long it's going to take. It's like, oh, it's going to take like 30 minutes. And then I would like not even be to the bathroom, and Heidi'd be like, they're ready. I'm like, can I please just go to the bathroom? Like I'd walk out of the house and around to the back, and like, so super, super fast. That being said, we got ahead of schedule, and we knew at the beginning of the second week that there was a possibility that we could move some stuff around and come in at 14 days. And we knew that at the beginning of the second week of the 3-week shoot, because the big question mark was President's Day holiday, and the whole holiday of it all. And so David and Julie and everybody in question, they were considering cutting off that one day, which would mean that we would only have one day in the embalming room as opposed to 2 days. And I was like, I can do it in 1 day. I can do it in 1 day. What I have to have, though, is I have to have, at the end of the day before, I needed X amount of time to move some of those scenes over to that day. And then we could have done it. Easy peasy. Like, if you had just listened to me at the beginning of the second week, I could have told you how to do it. And there were people that did not want to do that and were making their arguments for it. And if we're trying to save money, as I was told that I would have more money in post if we did do this. Of course, you always want as much money in post as you can. So David and I went to see a movie that Saturday night before the last week. And I was like, please, dear God, if you're going to cut off this day, do it now. Don't wait until Tuesday. Because if you wait until Tuesday, it's going to be bad. Like, I don't want the cast feeling like they're going to be rushed. I don't want the crew feeling like the things are going to have to be moved. The other thing was, art department was going to need additional people because we had to build the embalming room set. Locations needed to talk to the cemetery to make sure that we could get into the embalming room. And so, like, all of these conversations need to happen. And 2 hours after we wrapped that Tuesday night is when they made the decision. And all of hell broke loose. Just like I said it would. The actors were pissed. The crew was pissed.
Because that just comes down to, I mean, that's kind of what we want on set is, or maybe that's like what we want on set is that level of transparency of like, let's talk. Tell me what's going through your mind.
And we all, and like that second week, like we knew that was a possibility.
Yeah, we were on pace, so.
Yeah, and then of course it like, the decision should have been made earlier, and it was not. And of course, when people have gone home, they're in bed and they're getting the email saying that this is happening. And then of course that day, and it just happened to be, you're always going to have that one day on set where like the train comes off the tracks. And that was the day the train went off the tracks. And the plug in the grave hadn't been pulled, so John was supposed to be in the grave. There was a plug, there's a cemetery.
Yeah, we were on location that day.
Yeah. And there's one grave in the cemetery that is a Hollywood plot. Like all the TV movies and stuff shoot in this grave. But there's a plug that goes down 3 feet. And that's if you're doing an above ground funeral and you're just gonna gently lower the casket and then cut, then it'll just go down to 3 feet. Well, the plug hadn't been pulled. John was supposed to be standing in the hole at 6 feet. And we lost time for that. The art department truck hit a tree. I mean, it's like one of those. I remember like watching. It was like just like a human disaster movie happening. Like as you just like pan the horizon, and like and then of course you never want to upset the actors and have them feeling like they're stressed and they're being pushed and that they're being rushed. You never want the actors to feel rushed. And
yeah, because like you said, there's that little bit that was what you had forewarned about, was we don't want to pull a rug from the team and make them feel a certain way.
And then the art department didn't have time to hire additional people to make all of this stuff happen. Locations hadn't checked with the embalming room to see if we could get in there earlier. And then it turned out Lucifer was shooting there the next day. And so like all of these things that should have happened a week earlier, and we were playing catch up. And then at the end of the night, I mean, it was not a great day for me. But at the end of the night, like walking over to David and like finding out that we're going to lose one of the actors for 5 hours the next day, when that was the day I needed all of this additional time to save that day. Right. And now not only do I not have that last day, but now I'm losing 5 hours. So like I've lost a day and a half now to make this work. And I was like, I just remember being like, I don't want to hear the word overtime from now until this movie's in the can. Like it is what it is.
So then I guess what I'm thinking is, so as far as lesson learned,
I will never be the hero ever again.
So you're trying to. So your answer next time would be, you wouldn't say I can get this done in a day. Is that's the correct?
Unless I'm directing the movie.
Well, you were.
But then I'm producing the movie.
Okay.
Like if it's installation, not that we're gonna on a 10-day shoot, we're not gonna get to 9 days. But I would openly communicate this with everybody. If I were producing the movie, I would openly communicate this with everybody in advance. And it just happened, and again, it was lessons learned on all sides.
Oh, sorry.
No, I mean, I think production realized that was a bad move after the fact.
I'm sure it was voiced.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was voiced. Well,
I mean, it's definitely part of the docuseries.
Oh, jeez. Please.
No, I mean, it was like we had people that did not want to be on camera when this was going on, and I had zero fucks to give. I mean, I voiced exactly what I thought. And again, we're all friends. Like that's not this was not a personal thing.
Yeah.
It was just the wrong decision. And again, as an education for a podcast purpose, there's a reason why you have to listen to the people that are on the set that are making the movie. And when they say, do not do it this way, because X, Y, and Z is going to happen, and then X, Y, and Z happens, and you're the one that's getting
paying the price.
Yeah, pounded.
Because it reminds me of Greta Gerwig. I've kept up with some of her like Q&As and stuff, and I think it was from Little Women, because she did Lady Bird. She directed Lady Bird, and then she directed Little Women, and she had lessons learned from Lady Bird, and it feels similar to this, with like producers and production will tell you as a director, is like, there's too many pages here, we got to cut this thing down. And then she realized through the making of Lady Bird is like, okay, well, what she ended up doing for Little Women was she hid pages from production. She's like, sure, I'll say I'm going to cut this.
Right.
But on the day of production, I'm just going to like scribble out the monologue that I want Meryl Streep to say and just hand it to her and be like, hey, can you, like, we're going to shoot this too. Can you get ready for this? And then Meryl Streep's like, yeah, I got it. And then they shoot. It's like, we're just going to, and then on the day, I'm sure she communicates with her team in some fashion where she organizes it. But being sneaky with getting what you want as a director while working within the confines of the producers, because they don't often trust, especially like I could assume in like her position early on is like, I'm a first time director. Yeah. And they're not buying my word, so I've got to kind of come up and be sneaky about it.
And of course the other thing, again, going back to David, because again, this was not a malicious thing. It wasn't this mustache twirling villain thing where he was like, I'm going to like wait until the last minute.
Sure.
David and Julian were in NICU. Like they had like they were just trying to keep the babies alive, and the babies are walking now, and so but it's like, there were things that they were much more important in their lives at that point. That being said, I mean, there were several times where I was like, "You must really trust me to like be on my first film here and not be on set." Mm-hmm. And I mean, again, like we had no issues. We had no issues on for what you consider a film set, that except that one day, and it's going to happen on every film. It's going to happen on every film. There's going to be a day when people are going to be unhappy.
And the overwhelm happens.
And you just have to prepare for it. Have you had those days where like, how do you like when that day? Because what happened when and I had to turn around. I don't know if you remember, but I had to turn around and like walk away, and I was like, don't react. Don't raise your voice. Mm-hmm. Don't say anything. Just be present. You have to take it. And,
right.
And because as the director, it's like, yeah, you can turn around and like snap on somebody, but you're going to lose respect of everybody on that set.
And it's not normally the most productive thing to do.
Yeah. No. So I was like, just take it. Be present. It's all going to work out, but you have to take it. You're the one. This is your job, and you're the one that's about to get punched in the face. Mm-hmm. And it did. And it like, but the other fun thing that happened that day, thank God for it, Mark Singer, who played the sheriff, a childhood idol of mine. I loved the TV show V. He came, we wrapped that first big scene that,
You're not going to talk about the advice he gave you? Is that what you were going to bring up? Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
He walked up to me. He's like, "Hey, buddy, can I walk?" Because we're in the cemetery. He's like, "Hey, buddy, can I walk you back?" And he was wrapped at this point. And he walked up to me and he goes, "I just want to tell you, I haven't worked on a film set. This is the most fun I've had working on a film set in decades." And I was like, "Thank you." And part of me was like, "Don't cry, Chad, don't cry." And he's like, he goes, "It was really fun." And he could have stayed in base camp, but he came up and like watched
the chaos,
everything go down. And so like all of this is going down in front of my childhood idol. And so like he's watching this all go down, and I'm having to like just like, you can't react. You have to just chin up, take it. And I just remember thinking, take it. You'll get through this. Take it. Just take it. Like, I mean, like literally, it felt like I was getting punched in the face that entire afternoon. And he walked up to me and he goes, "I am so impressed with how you handled everything." Mm-hmm. And he goes, "I just really, you need to know that." And it's like he had no idea that's exactly what I needed to hear. And then I did, like, it's uncomfortable. Sometimes you have to pull somebody aside and say, "Don't you ever fucking talk to me like that again." Mm-hmm. And I did. And it, not to Mark Singer. I mean, obviously somebody else.
Sure. Not to me either.
There was an issue with someone on set, and and again, it's like you're on a film set. You're a family. You're a traveling circus. Like there are going to be instances, and you can say, "Don't you ever fucking talk to me like that again," and be assertive, and calm, and get through it. Shake hands, and you're done. And that's what had to happen that day. But that was like, they don't teach you that in film school. They don't teach you about the day that the train comes off the tracks, and you're the one that's like, you gotta. It's your job to remain calm and just take it.
The tone setter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you know that it's not just about this day, but it's the other 3 days that you have left.
Yeah, it's a tough job.
Yeah,
tough job. And we're pretty much at time. I don't know. I feel so. I'll try to. I don't know.
Well, thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
I hope I.
No, it's great.
Great.
I just feel.
I'm sometimes too honest in my.
No. That's what we're here
revealing.
For. No.
People like David will be like listening to this and like, "Motherfucker, why did you talk about what happened?" But it's like, and again, like, I'm pretty transparent and pretty honest, and like what you see is what you get, and I believe in sharing your experiences and being honest, because I think it'll only help other people. Like I would never share something that's an intimate secret or something that happened. But I think and of course all of us is on the docuseries anyway, so it's not like
sure.
And it's something that has and what the great thing about the problems and the issues that I learned on set are things that will never happen again.
We'll see.
Well, no, those won't. It's like, of course you're going to have issues,
Yeah, there'll be
but
different ones.
you know how to handle it the next time around.
Yeah. Where's this what's happening with this docuseries? One quick thing before you answer that. I remember when I'm a script supervisor, I know I like to. It's like a weird personality jump. Like I said, if I'm a director on set, of course, there's different expectation of who you are versus a script supervisor. So when I was script souping, the crew would be around, and I was kind of like, they never interview me, and I'm like, I kind of wanted to kind of almost trigger like director producer ready and be like, hey, like I'm like, you want to talk to me, like let's let me.
Did they not interview you?
I never talked to them once, but I wanted to almost push them to like I wanted to become a character in the series, but I decided to. I was like, it didn't come up. But yeah, they never got interviewed or I think I scared them. I'm not quite sure.
I know that. Well, there were certain people that did not want to be on camera, and I think because of that scared them off a lot of people. So they ended up like only following certain people.
Yeah, I figured they were just feeling it out because I kind of played shy and like avoidant, so they were probably like,
and they probably
just probably assumed. But I wanted to tease.
They're still in the editing process with it, depending on where it's going to land.
So it's not too late.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're still, and I think they're going to have to. There's some the final post of all of it will be filmed as well. The final lock of everything.
Gotcha.
But it's my hair goes from black to blonde to bald.
All over the place, man. So I'm assuming that's going to be somehow paired with the release of the feature.
Yeah.
It's kind of like either like a extras kind of thing or.
But the idea is it'll land wherever it lands. It'll land as an additional piece before the movie comes out.
Oh, gotcha.
Because it follows everything from.
It's kind of like some maybe even clips for like featurettes or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's I've seen parts of it. I've only seen parts of it.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's really, and again, like our whole point was like it has to be educational. This is not a reality show. We're not trying to create drama here. And but what's interesting is the drama that comes out of it are all educational things that are like very important. Like if you're watching it, it's like one of the big lessons for me last year was, with the payroll company, and this is like such an in thing, but it's like the payroll company they'll only if you're a loan out company you have to be an S corp. Well, I'm just a regular LLC, so they wouldn't pay me. So I had to go online and like build an entire new company just so I could get paid. So the lesson is, if you want to be a filmmaker in a loan-out company, make sure it's an S corp.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so, but all of this is going down while we're shooting. So it's like in between takes. Like at one point, I was like, "Son of a bitch!" And like they're on Heidi and Igor, but I'm in the back like screaming at my phone because I had to. In order to get paid, I had to start this S corp, and then they found some other way to like pay me as a vendor. So now I have these two companies now that I don't need now, but
or you could have just used one of them, or whatever.
Yeah,
who knows?
But that's like the things that come up, and it's like, and of course the whole conversation about cutting the day. That's a huge thing, but I think it's really interesting the way that's cut because David didn't, he gave them full reign to edit it, and we explained like what happened and the issues that came out after that. And again, it's not like anything bad happened. It was just a bad day at the office. People were grumpy.
Yeah, it's how set goes. Like we were saying, it just happens, and you just got to get through it.
Yeah.
But on that note, thanks for being down. It's great having you back in town as you're prepping for some cool stuff, and best of luck on all of that.
Thanks.
And where can people? Do you want people following you?
Yeah, on the Clubhouse, the Twitter, and Instagram is just at Chad Darnell.
Oh, nice.
And my Facebook is Chad Darnell Casting, because it's just that's my public page for everything. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, so keep up with. I'm sure you'll post announcements, and you're pretty good about like Undertaker's wife news or whatever you got
Yeah,
going
and
on.
I think
So
it's the Undertaker at the Undertaker's wife is our Instagram, but
okay,
that's in there.
sweet, cool. All right.
Thanks.
Beautiful. That's it. That's all I got. Bye, guys.
Bye.